Japanimation Station.
Hello and welcome to Japanimation Station, an anime podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff Podcast. I am Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to dive into the wild and wacky world of anime. This week on the show, we are in the dark middle chapter of the three very dark chapters. That is the trilogy of movies for Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel. We are talking today about Fate Stay Night Heaven's Feel 2, Lost Butterfly. And, you know, we talked last week about how, you know, the first movie's a lot of kind of tone and setup and stuff. And I talked about how I was surprised by where it ended because I didn't remember the splits between the movies and that the plot hadn't really happened yet. The plot fucking happens in movie 2. This is a big fucking movie.
That is what I wrote in my notes here, Sean. I wrote, boy, this is just a big chunk of movie. Big ol' chunk of movie. Feels like much more than it's 2 hours. I do mean that in a good way, but it is like, it's exhausting. And I think it is intentionally exhausting. It is a movie that overwhelms you with incidents in the same way the protagonists are very much overwhelmed with incident by the end. But boy, if Heaven's Feel 1 is sort of slow and contemplative and moody, Heaven's Feel 2 is just like the fucking action movie / horror movie / just like every genre that Kinoko Nasu can like reach for, all in a blender, everything happening. The world is just on fire by the end, in some cases literally. This is a traumatic movie, Sean. I feel like I need a good therapy session just to work through the events of Heaven's Feel 2 Lost Butterfly. And that's what this podcast is going to be Fate Stay Night therapy, because this is a lot of movie, Sean.
Yeah, I found it very funny, Jonathan, when you were watching the movie yesterday and you sent me a text message about halfway through the movie. But the text message just said, like, I'm at the point where Shirou loses his arm and I'm only halfway through. Like, what the fuck is happening?
Yes. So I know I got there and I was like, because it's not just Shirou loses his arm. That is where you have a massive action, like, climax feeling of that is where Saber fights Berserker and all this stuff is going on. And it ends with this super traumatic scene and Archer is gone and now his arm is grafted onto Shirou. And then I bring up my timeline and I'm like, you are 1 hour and 5 minutes into the movie. I'm like, there's no fucking way. That is some Yoshiyuki Tomino time magic mind blending, like crazy stuff. This is a fantastic movie, Sean, but a deeply upsetting one.
Yeah, it's incredibly good, and it is like this is what Heaven's Feel is. Like, this is I had a hard time talking about some stuff in the last podcast, I felt, because it was like, because you didn't quite get to really the main setup of the plot, which is that Sakura is one of the masters. And Shirou is faced with this dilemma in the plot of Heaven's Feel of, does he follow his code of trying to be a hero or a superhero, as Jonathan's subtitles like to call it, or the Seigi no Mikata, the ally of justice? Does he follow through on those principles that we saw in Unlimited Blade Works, or does he pick a different path and choose to fight for this one person instead of trying to fight for all people? And Heaven's Feel is the story of him choosing to fight for one person. And that is the story of this movie specifically, is him making that choice. And then the next movie obviously will be, how do you follow through on that choice when that one person is as sort of traumatized and hurt as Sakura, and what that hurt does where she's putting that back out into the world. And I think it's a really powerful story. And I'm very satisfied that now I can actually talk about what the plot is, because the first movie, it's like, first movie ends, you see like right before the point where that plot really clicks into focus, because movie two starts with effectively the scene where you find out that she is actually Ryder's master, and that she is the real inheritor of the magic of the Mato family. She's way more powerful than Shinji, all that stuff. That's like more or less the first scene of this movie, after you have your little like kind of orientation setup of the dream that Shirou has. And then from there, the movie just is like in fucking overdrive all the way through.
And, I think if you told me on paper that is how the plot would break down between these two movies, it would sound awkward, like you're overburdening one movie and underburdening the first movie. And it doesn't feel like that at all, because I think that first movie is so crucial at giving you the emotional and tonal context for what this version of the story is, that 2 is free to just go off to the races. And I think it feels like, and I'm sure film 3 fits into this whole schema perfectly as well, but like this feels very, very smartly paced between these two films. Even if, as you say, like the film 2 has like 7 times more plot, it couldn't have that much plot if you didn't have that really firm understanding of where we sort of are in the world in this version of the story that the first film gives us.
Yeah, and then you also have here, like, I think it really becomes clear how important that anchor of the Unlimited Blade Works story is for Heaven's Feel to work, right? Like, the whole crux of this movie, of the dilemma that Shirou faces, like, this is how Heaven's Feel operates as a sequel, effectively, to Unlimited Blade Works, is you need that understanding of what that principle is to Shirou, and what it represents, and what it means. You need that whole story with Archer and everything for this story where he makes that different choice and, like, flips on everything you saw for Unlimited Blade Works. That only works if you have that context. And I think it's one of the really fantastic things about Heaven's Feel and the whole structure of Fate Stay Night as a narrative project from the game, and what they've replicated in the anime adaptations, is that sense of getting to explore these thematic ideas that recur on themselves and then go off into another direction as they sort of build on those ideas. And then Heaven's Feel is a culmination of all of that, and you're really seeing that come to fruition right here in the second movie.
Oh, very much so. And it's also full circle, I think, with Fate Zero, if you are watching sort of the anime continuity that ufotable has put together, because you do go back so heavily to Shirou's pain in the 10 years ago with the fire, and learning more about Kiritsugu, and like Ilya gets involved here and learns about Kiritsugu, and they explicitly frame Shirou's choice. This is how, Grandpa Mato like frames it for him in his manipulative way, is like, if you don't do this to Sakura, it will recreate those events of 10 years ago. And it is feels like we are on the verge of fully closing the circle on this story that started in Fate Zero. And I think ufotable is so aware of that the next episode preview thing they do after the credits just recreates the next episode preview format from Fate Zero, with like all of the big pieces on the chessboard, and it even uses a bigger, like more bombastic version of the Yuki Kajiura theme from that. It's really cool. Like, by the end of this movie, you really do feel like you are on the doorstep of the grand culmination of this entire thing, which of course we are, because Heaven's Feel 3 is the end. But it is just done so masterfully.
Yeah, it is very impressive how, kind of like with the first movie, there's lots of smart adaptational things they do to tie those things in even tighter, because they know, right? They assume that the audience has watched Fate Zero. They obviously assume that the audience has watched Unlimited Blade Works. And yeah, that is a nice culmination. And specifically, they have designed the story so that it works in that anime version, or that anime sequence, perfectly.
Yeah, so it's an incredible movie. It's yet another leap in animation, I feel like. It's like as good as Fate Zero looked. Unlimited Blade Works was this giant leap, and as good as that looked, well, Heaven's Feel 1 is a fucking movie, and it looks like it. Well, Heaven's Feel 1 had some of the most amazing action I'd ever seen, including that amazing fight between Lancer and Assassin on the highway. That was, how were they ever going to top that? Well, you ain't seen nothing yet, because Heaven's Feel 2 has some sequences where I fully lost any ability to understand how they were making the things I was looking at.
Yes.
Is how I would describe the Saber Alter versus Berserker fight. Like, I'm pretty good at picking apart, like, how animation is made. There's a point in that fight where I go, I don't know. I have no idea how they're doing this. This feels like magic. I don't know how this exists. This feels like a more expensive series of images than anything Hollywood has ever put together. It obviously can't be. This movie cost an absolute fraction of probably the catering budget on Avatar 2, but Jesus, it looks unreal. And that's just the action. I think the direction of some of the dramatic scenes in this is just next level phenomenal. And we're gonna break down some of those. Particularly, I think the big confession scene on the hill, where Shirou is moving towards Sakura and she is trying to stop him, is, I think, maybe like the best directed dramatic scene in the Fate cycle we've seen so far. But yeah, it's, God, what a movie.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on the animation here, that it is, you reach a point and there's like some stuff in the third movie where I have that same feeling of where you just like, I don't know how they do this. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what I'm looking at in terms of like the technical, like, how do you make this? I have no idea, because yeah, it's sort of like, it feels so next level. It feels so unlike anything else. And it is the pinnacle to me of like the style that ufotable has developed, that we have seen now traced through in this project from Cont no Kyokai to here, of them finding ways to blend traditional 2D animation techniques with computers and particularly with 3D techniques, and matching all that together seamlessly and doing things that sort of break the rules of both of those worlds, of both 2D animation and 3D animation, feel like they have been fucking they have collapsed, they have been ripped apart and then fused together into some sort of new thing that you have never quite seen before. And that's very much the Saber Berserker fight features that really heavily. But I'm with you also that there's some of the stuff in this movie, some of the dramatic scenes that are like really burned into my head, particularly the rain confession scene, the scene where you find out, like, with Gilgamesh, where you find out what Sakura fully is, and that reveal, which is a very good adaptation of that scene from the game, where they use some of like the imagery from the art in that scene in the game, which is one of the most iconic scenes, I think, from the Heaven's Feel route, to just create this incredible sequence that is so horrifying and so impactful, that throughout the whole movie, it's just got incredible direction, incredible editing, incredible music, and like top tier class animation that is above anything you've ever seen in this kind of style. It's a hell of a movie, in summation. It's very good.
All right, well, we will see you next week for the finale of Japan. No, just kidding. We have a lot to break down here. Sean, where do you want to begin with Fate Stay Night, Heaven's Feel 2, Lost Butterfly?
Well, as someone who, is the first time you're watching this, I want to pass it off to you, Jonathan. What is, like, where you want to start with this discussion of, like, what is the thing that you, like, most stands out to you that you'd want to focus in on for this movie?
That most stands out? I think, we picked up on a lot in not just last week's episode, but I think in some of the intimations that Fate Zero gives us, that this is going to wind up being a story about abuse,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And even then, I was certainly not prepared. And I'm curious if this is how you feel, like, from the visual novel side of things, for sort of how deep this gets into cycles of abuse. It's not just the extremity of what Sakura encounters. I mean, we learn at the end of this movie that Shinji has been sexually assaulting her for years. So I do want to take back a statement I made last week where I said Shinji maybe didn't deserve what happens to him in Unlimited Blade Works. To be fair to me, I didn't know he had been doing this to Sakura when I said that. He absolutely deserved that in Unlimited Blade Works. Gilgamesh didn't know that. But, Gilgamesh treats everyone like fleas. In the case of Shinji, he deserves it. So, you have that. You have the, I think, absolute horror of the crest worms, which somehow, when fully exposited to us, are even creepier than when not exposited to us. That's a trick, Jesus. And so you have these, very real world abuses that are played out in this story. You have sort of fantasy abuses that clearly are metaphors for the entire process of abuse in and of itself, which I think is what the crestworms are. The way Kotomine describes that feels like it is this, fantasy version of what it is to be someone in a cycle of abuse. And I think you see all of that play out. You see how it plays out on Sakura. You see, Shiro's reactions to this. And it is such complicated space, this film, this story is wading into. It's space that I think you can so easily take the wrong route on. And I think it does it very deftly. I think it does it very sensitively. It's a movie that is often difficult to watch, but I think very rewarding. And I think it sets up a couple of, great themes about how, these are cycles. These are traumas that come in cycles. And it does feel like this story is bringing itself full circle in the questions posed become, can these cycles be broken? Not just these specific ones, but can cycles of human behavior be broken at all? Can the cycle of Shinji is abused by his father, and so he passes that abuse onto Sakura, who unconsciously but still is passing that on to the world around her. And, Shiro himself is someone whose entire worldview comes from a man who himself had gone through these cycles of violence and seen no way out of it. And that is passed on to Shiro, who has a very similar valence on the world. Can cycles of abuse and neglect and violence be broken? Can the Holy Grail War itself be ended? Is there a way beyond all of that? And I think, the point where I felt like you really see that coming into focus is that the last third of this movie or so, once Grandpa Mato, Zoken Mato, yeah. Once he gives Shiro this choice of, do you kill Sakura or not, that raises the specter of, I think, one of the absolute worst media tropes out in media today, which is the woman who goes mad and has to be put down by the male lover character. That is X-Men The Last Stand and the Dark Phoenix saga broadly, which with Wolverine having to stabinate Jean Grey. It is the end of Game of Thrones, the TV show, with Jon Snow pulling Daenerys in for an intimate kiss and then stabbing her to death. The entire look what you made me do thing, where you create a scenario where the male hero isn't just allowed to fatally abuse his female lover, but has to do it. And that this film is, I think, very deconstructive of that horrible media trope. It is not just Shiro rejecting that logic, but I think the entire story built in such a way as to make it crystal clear how deeply corrosive that logic is in the first place, that is not ending a cycle, that can only perpetuate it. There is no version where anyone comes out of that okay. Obviously, there are entire sexual dynamics around that I think Game of Thrones is completely unaware of and make it very offensive in that scene, that you have a character like Daenerys who has been sexually abused, that is part of her origin story, and her death becomes Jon Snow tricking her in a moment of intimacy to kill her, and that relation between sex and violence. This is something that I think Hinako Nasu is very aware of in Fate's Day Night. Mm-hmm. And I think the way all of that comes together, and of course we're going to have conversations about the way this movie, goes into sexuality, both the abusive kind and the fulfilling consensual kind. I think this is a really powerful deconstruction of one of the absolute most corrosive media tropes that is out there in the world right now. And I think the way that ties into the entire idea of cycles that this story is so interested in on both the level of abuse and on human history, that is where I really find this movie so fascinating.
Yeah. I think you're really hitting on a lot of what I also think are the major ideas here. With the cycles, I think this is something that's even more apparent when you're playing the game, where the game itself is one of those cycles, right? Where you go through once, and then you go through again, and you go through a third time, and each time you're kind of digging deeper into these ideas to try to get at the root and the heart of all of this. And the Holy Grail War is one of those. There will be one of the things in the third movie is we will find out more specifically about what is the Holy Grail War really like? Where does this come from? Why are they doing it? All that, and why is it corrupted? What is the Holy Grail? All that kind of stuff that is in the background and we've been kind of picking at, but we've never gotten to the root of, right? Heaven's Feel also will talk about some of that stuff. But yeah, very much there's this idea of these cycles and these patterns that you're working through. in order to try to find some kind of like salvation for these people, particularly for in Fate Stay Night for Shirou, and then ultimately for Sakura, who is the character that most needs Shirou, right? She's the person who needs to be helped, who needs companionship, right? And who needs guidance, much more so than Tosaka or Saber do, who are much more kind of fully formed, fairly well-adjusted people. Like Saber in particular has like some fucked up ideas around the Holy Grail, but she can kind of figure that shit out ultimately. Whereas like Sakura and Shirou, they need each other in order to grow and break these cycles that they have been a part of. But definitely for me, Heaven's Feel, and particularly for this movie, what I think it ultimately is like really getting at is Sakura's character, and why she is, to me, one of the most interesting characters in this franchise, and for me, kind of in anime in general, because I think it's such a sharp and compelling and insightful portrayal of what happens to someone when they experience this kind of cyclical, sustained abuse for most of their life. And the kind of multiple facets to Sakura's personality that you didn't really see much of in the first movie. There's some intimations of there's more to her as a person than I'm the sweet, kind kohai that is going to go over to my senpai's house. And, you know, the kind of, she's not actually Shiro's childhood friend, but she's playing up this childhood friend-esque character in an anime sense. I think she's like very intentionally performing this kind of trope in order to like find some sort of safety in this relationship with Shiro. But there's obviously a lot more and a lot like darker parts to who she is and the way she sees the world and how she feels about herself and other people that you start seeing here, and you start digging at who she is, and her like insecurities and her fears, and how those things are now sort of putting into the world the same kinds of pains that she has suffered, whether she's intending it or not. And I think for me, the most powerful thing about this movie and how they kind of orient the story as an adaptational thing is the way in which the plot of the story starts with, these are fantastical metaphors for these kinds of abuse. And then at the end, it sort of strips away the metaphor and it strips away the fantasy and leaves bare. It's like, but ultimately it's this. It's this relationship between Sakura and Shinji and this kind of abuse, which is real. It is not disguised behind magical crest worms and stuff like that. And it's incredibly, I think, powerful scene and frightening scene and upsetting scene in many ways. But the story sort of setting up all these ideas and these themes and these elements with something that's a little bit more removed through the lens of metaphor in fantasy and symbolism, and then allowing you to kind of work through those ideas with a little bit more remove. And then by the time you get to the end of the story, it says, okay, now we're at the place where we can say, let's take that lens away and let's look at what the actual thing is. And I think that's one of the really powerful moments in Heaven's Feel in the game, is seeing this scene. And then the choice to have that be the end of the movie is, let's take all that away. And that is what this movie specifically is about, is this abuse that she suffers. And here is what it ultimately is. I think that's like one of the most powerful things about this movie that then we see as, like, I think for me, like the best executed and fully shaped form of a kind of story you see in other places in Nasu's work, specifically for us with movie 3 of Kata no Kyokai with Fujino's story, right? We're kind of hitting at similar themes, but I think we're getting to an even deeper and more powerful place with those ideas here in Heaven's Feel.
Absolutely. And of course, part of that is that, you know, this is a much longer form version of the story than the single chapter, single hour-long movie. But absolutely, I was thinking back a lot to that film, and that there is a really interesting, you know, point to draw between those. And I think that's a really interesting arc you draw there, that we do kind of strip away the metaphor at the end. And it's also where the veil is lifted from Sakura's eyes. That's where she first commits violence consciously, right? Like, that is where she kills Shinji, and she knows she's doing it. And like, you hear her monologue of like, this person shouldn't be in this world. Like, this person is not fit to be here. Hard to argue with her logic, but like, you, for her own soul, don't want her to do it on certainly, right? Like, there's because that is the moment she gets consumed by the shadow at the end here and becomes some other version of herself. But yeah, I just, you know, this is the kind of story that can go wrong so easily, and is something that I think, because a lot of these tropes were very popular at the time Fate Stay Night was coming out, at the time the original game, like in the mid 2000s, and I think, and on to the 2010s too as well. But like, I have seen this done poorly, and I think as a kid didn't always realize what was so often offensive about it. I think as a culture, we're only reckoning with where you can go wrong with these stories, and I think to see it done with the sensitivity and the thoughtfulness that I think is actually requisite of a story like this is really astonishing, and it is the thing that makes this movie so powerful.
Yeah, and I think it is also then, to tie it into Shiro's story, right? It's one of those things I think is kind of genius about it, is how I think you don't realize when you're getting his version of the story in the previous routes, you don't know that this is where it's building up to, but it very intentionally is building up here, because this is like the ultimate kind of test of who he is in his philosophy, because you have had this kind of stuff mentioned in the Fate route and in Unlimited Blade Works of this idea of being a hero of justice, of being this, like, you know, omnipotent or like omniscient savior who I want to just save everybody no matter who they are. And, you know, everybody in his life telling him, well, it doesn't work that way. Like, you have to pick and choose the people you save, because oftentimes saving one person means not saving someone else. Like, life isn't so simple that you can, if, you know, there are people on opposing sides, you can't necessarily just save both of them because they're on opposing sides. You are picking and choosing who and what you're trying to support. And what this story is about in many ways is like, what if the person that Shiro needs to support is the bad guy, quote unquote, right, of the story, is the villain? Like, that's effectively what Sakura is. And I think it's a fantastic story to, like, actually kind of resolve what is an often seen issue with the way that villain stories are written, which often villains, in order to make them sympathetic, will have a kind of backstory like Sakura. And this is part of where that trope will come from, is this need to have that villain have a worldview and be sympathetic. So they need to be right about some things. They need to have been, like, suffered and be traumatized in certain ways in order to give them a motivation for why are they killing these people, and doing it in such a way where you can feel justified to get behind the hero character and, like, we got to take them out. But it's like, in real life, like, really what you want is those people to find support and to find some place to grow and move past the pain that they've suffered, and to find some kind of salvation and find some kind of happiness. And that's the choice that Shiro has to make, is the side I'm going to pick is the bad guy side, effectively. I'm going to work with the villain, for the villain, to try to save the villain, because that's the person who needs to be saved. It's not these other people. Like, these other people are going to be fine. Like, they can live their lives. Obviously he doesn't want to just, like, abandon the world to chaos and death, but he needs to save Sakura because that's the person who needs it. That's the person who needs him. And I think that that's a really powerful story to tell, that, as you say, like, is bucking this trope you so often see, where the person who has suffered abuse, or the person who has some kind of mental illness or disfigurement or whatever, that those things have pushed them to be a villain, and that person has to be killed or thrown into jail or whatever to resolve the story. Like, that is a fucked up way for the world to work, and a real hero, like, true heroism, would not do that to that person, would seek to try to help that person, and that's what Shiro does here.
Yeah, and this is something that's been on my mind so much lately, because I think there is the sort of male-female sexualized violence version of this, which I think is the most extreme bad version of this, where you make the villain the lover character and have her be, like, a good deep down but possessed or something, and then you, like, literally tie the final killing to the sexual relationship between the hero and villain. That is the Game of Thrones thing, that is the X-Men The Last Stand thing, and it's gross and offensive and, like, triggering. It's bad, right? And I think there's the simpler version of this, though, that, like, maybe strips out the sexual component of it, but it is still a version of, it's a wish fulfillment of a fantasy of, but let's construct a scenario where we can still commit violence on this person, right?
Yes.
And I think, like, the one that I've been grappling with a lot lately is the Marvel movie Black Panther. I actually give a guest lecture in a class at my alma mater, University of Colorado, on Black Panther every year. It's this class that an old teacher of mine, a friend of mine, does on sort of masculinity in cinema. One of the films is Black Panther. And I've praised that film in the past for, actually giving voice to some like radical politics, even if it is in the, mouth of the villain of that film. That like the villain of that film, Killmonger, is the person who is like maybe most like demographically aligned with the creators of the film and like has a lot of, interesting stuff in there. And it is a much more nuanced take than you usually get. And I think a lot of that is true. But I'm also seeing, and I think it's been a couple of things, it's that Black Panther 2 came out and was A, terrible, and B, like did a terrible job at the thing the first one did good. It's like the stupid version of Black Panther 1. And then also some other stuff like the Star Wars show Andor, which I think flips the script on a lot of this and actually lets revolutionaries be the heroes. And I think the critique that Black Panther ultimately becomes a status quo movie, it becomes a fantasy about doing violence onto the actual revolutionary and not having to like listen to that point of view. I think I'm seeing that as more valid more and more. Obviously Heaven's Feel doesn't have like the political valence of that, but still it is refreshing to see, go up to the line of that version of the story and then just refuse it and say, that's not the story we're in. That's not the story we're telling. What if changing the world means redeeming this person instead of enacting violence on them? And in a story that has, incredible action and mayhem and moments of violence that can be thrilling, to balance those things together is really remarkable.
Yeah, 100%. And that is like at its core, that is what Heaven's Feel is as a story. And it is, I think, so powerful to see that journey from Unlimited Blade Works, where we're working in this very high philosophical space about are ideals worthwhile? What is it to pursue an ideal that can never be fulfilled? Like this like beautiful dream you can never achieve. And there's a lot of validity to that perspective. I don't think like Unlimited Blade Works, like the viewpoint it gives is just wrong, but it's like it's a stepping stone to get to this much more human space, this much more real space, which is Heaven's Feel. And it's like, what is it to try to enact this in the real world? It's like, well, in the real world, you can't save everybody, but you maybe can help the people in front of you. And like, who are the people who most need your help, and who are the people who like you most need help from? I think that's like a really powerful movement to go from the philosophy of Unlimited Blade Works to the practical reality of Heaven's Feel.
Yeah, and it also exists in the space of tone and everything too, because Unlimited Blade Works is the big action show. That is like the superhero version, to borrow a phrase, if you translate Seigi no Mikata in a certain way, of Fate Stay Night. And this is just so much grittier and more grounded. I think a lot of the horror tone of this comes from it just being like, the world is more embodied. You just exist in it a little more. There's more connection to like literally like the surroundings of Fuyuki City. I feel like even just like matter a bit more in Heaven's Feel, the physicality of the world and all of that. Obviously violence when it happens in this series is even more visceral and felt and like less abstracted. There's a lot going on here.
Yeah. All right. So let's I think like break down some of the scenes from the movie. Let's just start at the beginning, because this is where we get a lot of our, the real setup for the plot here, where, you have a confrontation once again with Shinji at the school. This is like a version of events that happens in every single route. There's always has to be some kind of confrontation with Shinji at the school with Ryder, because that's also where the Blood Fort Andromeda is what is called, the barrier that Ryder has set up. This is also where they don't actually say what her name is, but I think we figured, Jonathan, do you know who Ryder is?
It's Medusa, right?
Yes, okay. It's Medusa. I was surprised that they never actually mentioned her name, but we see that she has the mystic eyes of petrification. It is fucking Medusa, right. Which is very cool. And this is where we learn that Shinji, who has had this book with him the whole time, if you go back and watch the scenes in Unlimited Blade Works, he has that book in that show as well. That is a thing that Sakura has transferred one of her command spells onto so that he can control Ryder, but he is not actually the master of Ryder. It is Sakura. And this is where you get one of the other major characters we haven't talked about that much yet, gets his setup for his arc, which is Shinji, where Shinji becomes completely fucking irrelevant to anything and everything. And the way they portray that in that scene, where it becomes revealed that Ryder is actually Sakura's servant, Tosaka and Shiro's entire perspective, like everything, they move their sight lines to Sakura, they're talking to her, they're thinking about her, and Shinji is on the fucking sidelines, and the camera goes over with him as he's like pay attention to me. Like, look at me. Like, he's the one who set this whole scenario up. He's the one that invited them here. He's the one who made this trap for Shirou, and nobody gives a shit about him. I think it's such a powerful setup to the movie to give you, one, your big reveal of this is what Sakura's relationship is to Holy Grail War, that she has known a lot more about this and been more heavily involved than anybody knew. And that also this sets up our what will then be the thing for our final scene, which is Shinji being fully pushed to the point where he's completely irrelevant to every single person in this story now.
Yes. There's some just tremendous framing here to do all of that. I mean, this scene overall, there's a lot of stages of it that are really well done. Like the initial sort of part where Shirou has to fight Ryder. Ryder isn't really trying to kill him for reasons. Obviously, Sakura has told her not to. But you have that is a really interesting use of space within the library. There's some shots in there that I don't... Like, they're clearly 3D because of the perspective, but they don't look like it at all. That, like, must be their thing where they're, like, fucking tracing 3D elements. It's just really well done. Then you have, you know, Tosaka and Archer come in with one of the best, like, hero entrances in this whole fucking universe of jumping in through the window, and Tosaka is tossing the, like, gems out and everything. But it does, as you say, come down to this, really a conversation. And that framing of like the big windows with the sunlight coming in. And so you have these leading lines all through the images of like the breaks, the shadows and the light kind of breaking each other up. And you have everyone sort of on one side of the room talking in like a kind of arranged set of rows. And then Shinji on this other side, just completely alienated, completely isolated, and just going crazy, with Hiroshi Kamiya doing tremendous work in a... not a thankless role, but a role that, like, no one's going to go, like, yeah, that's my favorite Hiroshi Kamiya character, Shinji, you know, because he's a piece of shit. But it's one of his best performances. It's so phenomenally done.
Because I think you can, you know, like, he's an awful piece of shit, but you can feel so much his pain here, like how lonely he is as a person.
Yeah.
Where he has nobody and nothing, really, and like he wants to be so important, right? Because it's not just that he's not a master. He can't use magic at all, right? That's one of the things that they do where he has later in the movie, he has this vial that he's holding on to that like you kind of don't know what that thing is. And then at the very, very end, he gives it to Sakura and it glows because that vial is full of this liquid or whatever that reacts to the magic of the person holding it. So it's like Shinji cannot use magic at all. And in many ways, like the biggest moment of like disinflating moment for Shinji is when he learns not only is Shirou a master, he also can use magic. He's a mage, right? He sees the book or whatever that Shirou has enhanced to take that blow fall out from his shirt. And that's the moment where Shinji like ultimately kind of loses everything, is this realization that he has nothing over anybody, right? Like that Shirou has everything that Shinji wants, and Shinji has been like bullying him for years at this point. And we talked about their relationship in the first movie, the sense of that Shinji wants to be friends with Shirou, but then maybe at some point realizes that Shirou is nice to everybody and will do whatever you ask of him. And that starts to upset Shinji because he wants a special relationship that is like unique. And he doesn't have that with anybody without it being something he is literally forcing onto that person, like with Sakura. And so to realize that the one thing that he wants, which is this status as a mage, which is prestige, which is respect, he has none of those. And Shirou, not only does he have it, he's quietly had it for the entire time he's known him, right? Like you not just like wake up one day and you're a mage, you have to train in it. And I think that's just such a powerful moment to see just how kind of pathetic a person Shinji really is.
The utter inadequacy of Mato Shinji is revealed here, and it is, you're right, it is extremely brutal. Just to clarify, like, continuity and everything here, so because of the root nature of this is in every version of this story, Sakura is the actual master of Rider, and has passed this on to Shinji, and Shinji just gets taken out early in the first route, I think, right? And then gets taken out in the second route, but then turned into Gilgamesh's puppet. So I guess in those routes, Sakura I guess Shinji is taken out in Unlimited Blade Works. So maybe Sakura will have a nice life after that. But in the Fate route, certainly that I'm just thinking about like the routes where Sakura is not taken care of. That's very sad to me that those routes like I guess that's why everyone considers Heaven's Feel the ultimate one in part is because maybe Tosaka doesn't get to wind up with Shirou, but she'll be okay. Sakura is fucked in the other routes. Jesus.
Yeah, it is dark. Although, to be clear, in the Fate route, Shinji does get brutally murdered by Berserker. So,
good. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, you take out Rider, and then I think shortly after that is when Ilya kills him, because anyone who was a master is still a threat, right? This is something we learned in Fate Zero, because they can still potentially make a contract with another servant. Shinji doesn't get a happy ending ever. Like, it's like, either becomes the grotesque monster or he gets brutally murdered. But yes, in the other routes, presumably what just happens is that Rider is defeated completely in those fights before she ever is able to revert to Sakura's control. And because Shinji has basically, again, he is a worse master than Shirou, and Shirou is a terrible master, right? Like, Saber can barely do anything. Saber can't even, like, become a spirit form because of how kind of amateurish Shirou is as a mage. Shinji can't even really do any of that shit. So, Rider has no real magical supply from him, so that's why she's so weak. And then as soon as
feeding on the school and everything, right?
Yes, that's why she has to feed on people. And so when Sakura then takes full control again of that contract, Rider's fucking Medusa. Rider is crazy fucking powerful. She's one of the most powerful servants in the whole thing. It's just you don't know that until you get to Heaven's Feel.
That's interesting because I had been going through this whole cycle where in Fate, because again, my way through all of this is starting with Fate Zero. In Fate Zero, the best servant as a character is Rider, right? Like, that's everyone's favorite. It's the big Akio Otsuka character. Rider fucking rocks. And Rider, so far in this story, in Unlimited Blade Works and in part 1 of Heaven's Feel, kind of an off, like, we barely see her in Unlimited Blade Works. She's killed off screen. And then in this, she's seemingly defeated by Saber in one move at the beginning of Heaven's Feel 1. And so I'm like, when are we going to get back to, like, I want to see what is this story's version of Rider? And of course, now we have, I assume we'll get even more with her in film 3, but we get a lot of her here. And obviously, yes, she kicks unholy amounts of ass. She's awesome. And seems to also be like a good principled person, like some of the best servants are, in a way that, Shinji is not. So yes. Kind of a poor match with Shinji there. But yeah, I guess the only route where Shinji lives then is actually Unlimited Blade Works, because he does survive. Tosaka saves him.
Yeah, he does technically survive, although
Tosaka should have left him to die. Yeah.
Yes, that's what I said. If you go back and listen to Unlimited Blade Works, you could read between the lines now. If you didn't know Heaven's Feel, if you're wondering, like, God, why is Sean so fucking harsh on Shinji? Well, now you know why.
Now we know why.
He deserves it.
Yeah, to be fair to Tosaka, she didn't know either, and she just didn't want to leave someone for dead, and because she's a good person. Shinji is not. Yes, but yeah, no, this entire library scene is fantastic. It's one of the things that's fun is because I've read Witch on the Holy Night, even though I have not read Fate Stay Night, I can see all the like visual novel-esque elements of the story of like, I can imagine like this scene in the library is such a clear like visual novel-esque story of like, I was called to the library and you go in and like that framing and everything.
Yes.
Because I assume it's an environment also that they're able to reuse across the routes. But of course, ufotable takes that and just goes to town with it and like makes just so fully explores that space and does such great framing with it and everything. It's fantastic.
Yes. This is also where we get another horrible injury for Shirou, that, he gets stabbed in the gut because Sakura's magic goes out of control when that vial gets broken. And I do like the continuity that they have of like, this version of Shirou does no contract with Saber. So it's like, he's fucked up for the rest of the story. Like, that's, he's got blood all over his shirt. Like, when he starts moving again, when he wakes up in the church later, like his wound starts bleeding again. It's like, he's not magic fucking Superman anymore. He can't get cut in half and come back to life. So it's like, that shit's pretty brutal for him.
Yeah. The next scene is back in Kotomine's church, and this is where we get a couple of big reveals. We get the conversation about the crest worms, and then we learn that Tosaka and Sakura are siblings, which, if you are in the anime continuity, is not new information to you, and I do feel like is kind of played here like you are expected to know. But in the visual novel, of course, that would be the reveal, right? So I'm just curious from you. I want to get back and talk about the crest worms in a second, but just that big reveal, how does it, like, are there ways they sort of play it differently a little bit in the movie, or is that just me imagining that?
It's been a while since I played the game, so I don't remember the specifics of how it goes. I mean, I think it's broadly similar, but it is obviously, I mean, all the conversations are longer conversations than the visual novel because it's a visual novel. But there are moments of obviously like foreshadowing that kind of help build up this idea, because you have, Rin has a weird fixation on Sakura throughout all the whole game in the first two routes, and it's never really explored or explained. How does she know Sakura? Why does she have this, Tosaka doesn't have much of a personal relationship with almost anybody. Most she has is she has a friendship with Mitsuzuri senpai from the archery club. But the reason why she has that relationship is because she was always hanging around the archery club for no apparent reason. If you remember, actually, at the very beginning of Unlimited Blade Works, they do this scene in the prologue. Shinji gets the idea that Tosaka is always like kind of hanging around at the archery club because she likes him. And that's the first time that she shoots him down, because she's like, oh, you poor, like, misguided little boy. Like, how could you possibly think that? And really kind of, ruins his whole self-esteem, because the reason why she's there is Sakura. So there are lots of moments where they help set up that idea and they foreshadow it in the other routes. But yes, this is where it becomes fully clear. And I remember being surprised by it. Like it in retrospect, it all fits into place and it makes sense. But at the time, I was like, wait, what the holy shit? What the fuck? Oh my God.
I think there's a way sort of like it's animated and shot of that, like Tosaka, her like, she's sort of like, her back is like to you to Shirou as she explains this. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the shots are on like Shirou's reactions and surprise. So the whole scene is kind of framed to be about Shirou's surprise at this more than I think the viewer is meant to be surprised. Yes. Because most viewers of the anime version will know this either from the visual novel or Fate Zero. Because this is, as you said, the poor anime-only watchers who went through all the years of like Unlimited Blade Works not getting any follow-up on the poor girl with the worms. Now this is all coming back together, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I do also want to talk about the explanation of the crest worms here, because it's a great and disturbing piece of writing, delivered by Koto Mine, who always revels in disturbing things.
Yeah.
But we have seen the crest worms in Fate Zero. We've seen them so far here. We haven't had them actually formally exposited to us. So this is the first time in the animes, at least, that it's been exposited. And he says, think of them as living magic circuits. Once a crest worm sinks its teeth into you, it penetrates the entire body, eating your life away. It pierces and dampens the skin with its mucus, sating its hunger by elevating and destroying the pleasure centers. As a result, any woman preyed upon by these insects will be entirely violated in both body and mind. As long as those things remain within her body, her life force, her mana, will be leached without end. To fully remove the crest worms would truly require a miracle akin to the Holy Grail. And this is what you were talking about earlier, Sean, of like starting the discussion of abuse in this space more of like fantasy metaphor, because what Kotomine says there is like less useful as an actual like I don't really still know how the crest worms work after that, but I understand the metaphor that is going on here, that the idea of the abuse being that something that like destroys your ability to feel pleasure, that entirely violates you, not just your body, but your mind as well, your personality, that your life force is leached, and that to remove that abuse, the scars of that, would be a miraculous thing. It's not something that someone can just do on the body, right? He can't do that as a surgeon or even as a magician. It is this thing that would require a miracle. And of course, that is establishing, I think, for us, the stakes of what is it to be someone living with this? So that later on in the story, when it really does become very real to us in multiple ways, I think we understand the emotions of it because we started in that space of metaphor where it's a little easier to deliver those emotional ideas.
Yeah, but it's when you have this sort of like vague statement of it like has violated her body and her mind, like you understand like what metaphorically that can relate to in terms of real world sexual abuse, but it gives you this sort of distance where you don't have to like confront and think about that specific scenario. It's like weird magic worm shit. But as you say, like it very pointedly is this like using this as a metaphor for sexual abuse, in the relationship between the crest worms reflects the kind of lifelong trauma and behavior changing trauma, right? Because part of the thing is also, and this is something like maybe jumping a little bit ahead, but like Sakura's relationship to sexuality is really, in sex, is super complicated, in a way that like is often true of childhood survivors of sexual abuse, where it like a common response to that is for that child to be very like promiscuous, right? And at a very early age, and to engage in like risky or unusual sexual behavior with their peers, like that are not like the person who's committing abuse on them. Because their relationship to sex and their relationship to intimacy has been kind of broken in this way, and they're seeking some sort of like positive intimate relationship to overwrite the negative abuse that they have suffered. But their like understanding of the relationship to how that works and what sex is and what sex can be, or like other people's perspective in relationship with sex, has been changed so much from this like traumatizing negative experience. And so you see that with Sakura, that she wants to have like a sexually fulfilling relationship with Shirou, but she struggles with the shame of feeling like she is dirtied or she is corrupted because of this abuse that she has suffered. And, you start getting that idea more like specifically expressed here, where it's like she is a sexual person, right? And she wants to have sex. Like the fact that she was sexually abused doesn't mean that she's like asexual, but it means that her attempts to like engage in that pleasure is like complicated, and it hurts her, and she doesn't know how to go about it or how to feel about it because it's mixed up in so many complicated emotions.
And this is definitely an area where Heaven's Feel is able to go quite a bit deeper than part 3 of Kara no Kyokai. And part of that is, I wouldn't knock Kara no Kyokai for that. That is a 1 hour, 1 chapter thing, right? But you are able to kind of follow up on, like with that character in Kara no Kyokai, it is more about sort of the rage and the anger and the resentment and the remaining sense of pain, as the title of that movie, that comes with that kind of assault. And this is able to delve into some of that, absolutely, but also go with like, who is she as an embodied person in the world, And I think that is also, I think that's a level where a lot of stories like this in fiction don't get to go, because it's really hard to deal with. And part of this movie, this movie's arc really is kind of defined by moments in Sakura's sexuality and her relationship to herself as a sexual being. You have this moment here where it is being sort of exposited to us. You have during her big conversation with Shirou where they kind of come clean to each other, relatively clean. There's still more secrets to be uncovered. But she blurts out, "I'm not a virgin. I am not." To her, she's like saying like, "I'm not pure," and she thinks Shirou will judge her for that. And of course, Shirou does not. In fact, that's the moment when Shirou finally embraces her and is like, "No, it's okay." But she is still worried about this. You have a moment where she essentially tries to sort of get in bed with Shirou, kind of backs out at the last moment. That's the blood-sucking scene, which we can talk about. Then you have a moment where she is like alone and feeling like sexual frustration. Then you have the actual final like consummation of it together. And then, of course, the end of the movie is the attempted rape by Shinji and the reveal of where a lot of this comes from. And I think those markers, it's part of what makes this movie so harrowing, but also like so interesting and full as an emotional experience, because you do see Sakura able to reclaim it in some ways. Like this relationship gets deeper than Tosaka and Shirou ever became, I think, in part because of the sexuality. And that like this is not just like a sort of childhood flirtation. This really does go to a level where there is a genuine intimacy between them, not just bodily, but what that means, like what they have to admit to each other to get to that point. And it is part of like how this whole movie is structured.
And it's why this route is the only one of the 3 from the game where I feel like it is substantially improved in the original PC version that it is explicitly about sex. Because in the PC version, in the Rialto Nua version, the PS2, the all ages version of the game, where they create alternate versions of the scenes that were originally sex scenes, for the Fate route and the Unlimited Blade Works route, like those sex scenes are in the Unlimited Blade Works route. It's like that sex scene works fine. But it's not necessary. Like the replacement scene totally works perfectly well. The Fate route, all the sex scenes are terrible. It's Saber. Like it makes no sense. There shouldn't be a sexual relationship. It's just weird and it feels so forced. But it's like, it's unfortunate that it's the first time you see them is in the Fate route, because it's like, I think it sets you up to expect that to be the case for the rest of them. But in Heaven's Feel, in the PS2 version, it's the blood thing. So, and I don't remember if that first encounter that they do here, I don't remember if that scene is also in the original version or if that's just a nod to the Real to Dua version. It's been long enough I've played, I can't remember the distinction there. But regardless, in the all ages version, it doesn't become sex. That allows her to sort of like sate this need she has, both in terms of like magic, right? She's able to sort of share mana with her and Shirou through that like intimate physical connection, similar to what happens with Tosaka in establishing the magic crest at the end of Unlimited Blade Works. But then there is also obviously like an emotional and like physical need that she is gratifying through that relationship. And that becomes blood-sucking in the all-ages version instead of it being sexual, which, you know, works fine to get the point across in a broad metaphorical sense, but like it takes the edge off of the relationship so much that I think having the complicated nature of the relationship when it is fully sexual is so much the point of Heaven's Feel that it was one of the things I was most impressed by when I watched this movie, where they put the sex scene in there, and it's like, yes, like, thank you. Like, you know, it's something you just don't see a lot in anime, particularly like modern anime, is you don't get a lot of like sex as a direct element in the story. It's so often either just not a factor, even in romance-based stories, or it's just like a thing that is sort of jokey that never actually becomes fulfilled. It's more like, you know, obviously they're like horny teenagers, but they never do anything about it. And here they really use it and they fully explore it, and they adapt those scenes really effectively and faithfully from the game, leaving them intact. And like, I'm just super glad that they did, because I do think it's really necessary for the story. Because also in the game, if I remember correctly, it's never in the all ages version made explicit in the conversation with Shinji at the end that it's rape. Like, I think it's like more like vaguely physical abuse, and that like it never sort of puts like a specific kind of word to it. But I think it's really important that it is specifically rape and sexual assault, that is what's happening to her, and that's how that relates to so much of her experiences and how she sees herself in the world throughout the rest of the story makes so much more sense. In her relationship to sex and her relationship to Shirou is obviously like defined in some ways by how that has been twisted by her relationship with her brother. And so them keeping it intact in the Heaven's Feel movie here and doing such a good job with it, I was incredibly impressed, because I did not expect, when I knew that they were making the Heaven's Feel movies, that they would take that approach with it.
And honestly, I think the blend of doing the all ages stuff for Unlimited Blade Works and doing the explicit version here works really well, because and again, I can only speak having seen the Unlimited Blade Works anime, but like, it feels natural that like that sex wouldn't enter that story. Like, I think that like the way we see Tosaka and Shirou in that story, I don't think they're really ready for that like commitment together. Yeah. Like, they're not, like, they could do it. I'm not saying they're like physically immature, but like, it doesn't feel like they are at the level of knowing themselves or each other well enough to actually go through with that. And so I think it makes sense what version they do there. Whereas here, like, Sakura and Shirou have just pre-existing a much more intimate relationship. And I do feel like at the point where they are finally in bed together, they've admitted much more with each other. They've had to go through more kind of extreme, like, I think, self-analysis and things like that. You know, Shirou is a more mature version of himself at the end of Heaven's Feel 2 than he is at any point in Unlimited Blade Works, and that's by design, because this is the story that's pushing him the furthest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that makes sense. And it also, it's just in the, assuming Kinoko Nasu wrote Fate Stay Night relatively linearly, it also makes sense to me that the first route would have the, well, I gotta put these in here because this is the kind of game we're making, and then Unlimited Blade Works would be like, I still gotta put them in here, I've got a little bit of a better sense, and then by the time of Heaven's Feel, it would be like, you know what, I know how to actually integrate this. It's kind of funny to me.
Yeah, and it's just like the content and style of the story of Heaven's Feel is just much more receptive to it being more actively sexual. Like, there's just no space in Fate or Unlimited Blade Works for that to be an important part of the story. Again, the Unlimited Blade Works scene works fine, partially because part of the point of the scene is that they're maybe not really ready for it, because it is this really awkward sexual encounter between two people who don't know what they're doing. And that's like the only reason why I think that scene works well enough that like I would have no qualms about recommending that version or the all ages version. I think they're equally fine. The Fate route is the only one where it's like, if you want to just like skip through the sex scenes, if you're playing because you want to see those scenes with the other routes, like feel free to just skip unread and just hit that skip button until it's over because they're fucking terrible.
No, I think ufotable, I think they owe us. They need to make Fate, and they need to do it as movies so we can have the full Saber sex scenes. Just to completely ruin our sense of this entire world.
Yes.
Yeah, when I was when early in this project, when you were explaining the eroge aspect of all of this, and I was like, well, obviously it's Tosak and it's Sakura and the other routes. Who is he fucking in Route 1? And I'm like, oh, it is just Saber. For these reasons. This is weird. Looking that up.
It's so fucking weird.
It's so weird. God, yeah. Because there's also like, with the other two, they're all just teenagers, like together. Like that's a normal thing. Saber is like much older than him in multiple senses of the word.
Yes. Saber, like, mentally is like 35 years old. It's like all kinds of fucked up, on top of her being like an ancient spirit or whatever that exists outside the confines of time.
Also, she's a king. All sorts of things. It's I guess she's not a king of anything in this timeline, but you know what I mean. Anyway, but yeah, I want to go back though, Sean, to because I want to get to some of these other Sakura scenes. But to me, my favorite scene in this movie is, and the one that is most burned into my fucking retinas, is after the church. You have Sakura leaves, and she leaves the key behind. And Shirou takes that and goes after her. And you have their big kind of confrontation on the hill, sort of overlooking Fuyuki City, and her explaining, like, I lied to you. I only started to go into your house out of fear for my grandfather. I was never honest. I'm soiled. I don't deserve this. And Shirou just walking towards her, more and more and more. And I think this sequence is such a fucking triumph of storyboarding, of animation, of voice work, of editing, the pacing of it, the way we keep moving closer and closer to Sakura, the way each cut back to Shirou just is like filled with this unstoppable momentum, like he is going to her, and like this is like he has a purpose in a way we have never seen him have before. Mm-hmm. Of course, culminating in the moment where he says, I am going to, if I'm going to be a hero, I'm going to be a hero for her. And of course, that being the big shift here from Unlimited Blade Works. But like down to, they do this whole thing, like when he's close to making that declaration, they literally go into like Matrix style slow-mo and have the rain coming down slow. He's like walking through puddles and the water is coming up and like everything. There's a shot where he's saying, this is the woman she is all I want to protect. This is the person I hold most dear. That is done with like a fisheye lens. Mm-hmm. Something ufotable does more and more over the stuff we've talked about is using more like actual camera techniques, like focus pulling. Here they're using a fisheye lens, things like that. And coming to that moment where she says, I'm not a virgin. And that's when finally the bodies connect and he embraces her. And I just like, I don't know how you get to the end of that scene without tears coming out of your eyes. I literally don't. There's something would have to be fucking wrong with you. It is such a masterpiece of a scene.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's my favorite scene in definitely this movie. It's definitely a competition for like my favorite scene in anything we will have watched for ufotable Moonworks. It's so good. In particular, it's that fisheye lens shot. That's like the one that, like, when I think about the Heaven's Feel movies, that is the thing I think of immediately, is that fisheye lens shot. It's so powerful. It's just like, because it's just so like unexpected to use, because it's the only time they use that technique in this whole, like in the Heaven's Feel movies specifically. It's just like an unusual technique to use in almost any context, really, but particularly for anime, where obviously you're having to find a way to draw the perspective. You can't just literally use a fisheye lens. And so using that for this moment where you're in Shirou's head as he's walking towards her, like with this commitment, as you're saying, and him sort of, he has obviously already decided what he's going to do, but he's sort of narrating his process of how he has gotten to this point and like with the reasons why he is going to abandon like the thing he has lived his whole life for up till this point for this woman. And yeah, going to this distorted camera perspective that sort of warps the distance between them as he slowly closes it. really powerful. And it is a like genius use of slow motion in animation. You know, like oftentimes you see slow motion used for fight scenes, right, to sort of emphasize the speed and to give clarity to like the complex motion that's going on, but slowing down this key moment as he walks towards her and having this long scene of just him walking silently through the rain, so powerful. Yeah, and then you know some of those lines you've picked out of like her telling him that she's not a virgin, you know, and that like that means, you know, obviously that she sees that as meaning that she is dirty, and that being the moment where he embraces her. And then there's the moment at the end where he says, "Ore Sakura dake no seiki no mikata ni naru," where he like literally says, "I'll be a hero for you and you alone," basically, like, which is obviously the complete inversion of what he has been saying up to this point. This is his answer to the question that Kiritsugu has given him of like, how do you be a hero? It's like, I'm to be the hero for this person. And then he takes the keys, which are in his hand as they're embracing, and he puts it and grabs her hand, and then their fingers intertwine around the keys, using, again, our favorite use of recurring symbolism in ufotable Moonworks to incredible effect with the keys. It's just so powerful. It's just a perfect scene. It is a perfect scene of filmmaking, really.
Yes. No, it's and filmmaking. It's filmmaking. Yeah. Like that's one of the things that ufotable is so good at, is I feel like we talk about the 2D, 3D thing, but even like going past that binary, I just think they're much more disconnected from like the normal limitations of animation. I feel like they really are thinking like, and obviously this is true of a lot of animators, it's not just them, but I think they're one of the best at this, of like, what is the visual technique that is best to illustrate this moment? Sometimes that comes from very traditional anime language. Sometimes that comes from absolutely non-traditional filmic, like proto-filmic, you know, before a camera language that is probably hard to do in animation because you have to realize perspective and all this stuff that is a little odd. You know, why do you use a fisheye lens in that moment? Well, a fisheye lens is kind of like an inverted wide-angle lens where you're like making the screen kind of bulbous, and so you're making the center of it kind of is bulbing out, and so the distance between these two is sort of both exaggerated and concentrated because the world on either side of them is warping. Like, there's such a clear reason you would use that, but you have to go very far out of your way in an anime production to do it, right? And it's just things like that they are so incredibly good at. And here we're getting that. We are getting the slow motion. We're getting, you know, just very obviously good framing and composition. It's a real example of how good they are at every step of this. And, you know, we cannot go past this point without praising the voice actors. You've said before, Sean, that Sugiyama Noriaki, who plays Shirou, gets better at this part every time he comes back to it. And I'm really feeling that in this movie. Like, you can, like, on one level, I feel like you can feel his excitement of, like, getting to revisit the like, deepest parts of this character and, like, really go to town on it. But also just, I feel like, you know, he's an actor who keeps working and keeps getting better. And there's just a maturity and a skillfulness to how he delivers these lines where, like, you could be holding your eyes closed during this scene and not getting any of the visual component. And I think it would still maybe make you cry because his intensity of, like, the love he feels in this moment and, like, the choice that is coming out of that is so powerful. And, of course, Shitaya Noriko, who plays Sakura, is every bit his equal. And and honestly is, like, revealing, for the Heavens Field route at least, we're seeing the real Sakura kind of for the first time in this scene of, like, someone uninhibited. And it hits you like a ton of bricks because you've heard this voice a lot at this point between her scenes in Unlimited Blade Works and what we've had here. And you're realizing she is so much more than we'd seen up until now. It's a beautiful two-hander.
Yeah, it's amazing, particularly for Sugiyama. I think as Shirou, what I really like in these movies is he lets his voice go to a much like deeper, more mature place, right? Yeah. Like in Unlimited Blade Works, like it feels like he's very conscious of trying to make Shirou sound young, right? Which is appropriate because he is young. And I think the youthfulness of Shirou is really emphasized in the Unlimited Blade Works story because you're contrasting him with Archer, which is his adult version from the future. But here, you know, Shirou is being pushed into a darker and more mature place as a person. And so I think Sugiyama lets his voice settle in a deeper register that really brings out like other kinds of nuances to Shiro as a character that I just really love. And then yes, Shitaya Noriko is amazing as Sakura, having to blend these like different things, right? Of like having to allow you to kind of fall in love with the more tropey version of the character, which is the, you know, the girl who comes over to his house and, you know, clearly loves him but never says anything about it, that kind of thing. And is just sort of very light and fun, and or like not fun, but is sort of light and happy and cute, and that's like all the character is. And then revealing, no, she's like a really complicated person who has had a lot of stuff happen to her. And those moments of her trying to sort of resist and push him away, and like digging at like every time she says something, trying to dig deeper and deeper for a reason to be able to push him away because she's afraid of being exposed for who she actually is, and having like a real relationship with him, not this sort of like senpai kohai thing that's this very comfortable relationship where she feels totally safe in it because she doesn't have to confront anything deeper. Here it's like, no, like you actually have to be yourself, and that obviously scares the ever-living shit out of her. I think that comes through so much here in the performance, and then through the rest of this movie as Sakura is pushed into darker and darker spaces. You know, Shitaya Noriko just has like so much range she's able to express for that character.
Yeah. I think you're so right about Sugiyama and the like depth of his voice. I also like, you hear a little bit more that like, oh right, this is not a 16-year-old boy. This is a, you know, probably around 40-year-old man doing this voice at this point. And it's, I don't think he fully lets Shiro sound like an adult, but you hear a little bit of the age. You hear a little bit of like crackle in the voice, that just what it signifies to us is not that Shiro is 40. It signifies to us that Shiro is like, has a seriousness to him in this moment, and like a understanding and a maturity that we haven't heard before. And yeah, that's just using kind of all the tools a voice actor has, and it's beautiful. And I love the specific writing of Shiro's inner monologue as he goes up to her, and what allows him to arrive at that moment of, I'll be a hero for you, is saying like, she's all I want to protect. She's the one I hold most dear. And if I want her to stop shedding tears, if nobody else will blame Sakura, if she has to do it herself, then I'm the one who has to take her by the hand and drag her into the sunlight, even if no one else will forgive her. And he trails off there, but the implication being, obviously, it will be me. And you know, what he's realizing there, and this is what is so smart about this, is that, you know, the Seigi no Mikata thing, anyone can do what Kiritsugu would have done, right? Like anyone can do I'm going to look at the world and I'm going to try to do the utilitarian best for the most number of people thing, right? Not that anyone should do it, but anyone can do that. He's the only one in this moment who can do this for Sakura. He's the only one she trusts enough. He's the only one who has this real relationship with her like this. There's no one else who's going to come save her in this moment. And I think that's just such a beautiful portrait of a real relationship, right? Like real intimacy is what we see here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it moves out of that like abstract headspace of like, how do I do objectively like the most good possible in the world, and it rejects that worldview for like, how do you help the people in front of you, and how do you help the people that you love? Like, to be human is to pick and choose things, and to pick and choose who and what you prioritize, and it is like natural and normal for you to care more about the people you love in your life than people you do not know about. And Shiro, living this life where he was trying to do that, he was trying to care about everybody equally and save everybody equally, is not a thing that a human can do. And that's what leads him to ultimately being Archer, right? And there is a beauty and a nobility to that. And I think we all recognize it. And that's what Unlimited Blade Works is about, is like the beauty of idealism, but also that like that will never lead you as a person to happiness. And it will also not lead the people closest to you in your life to happiness either. If like that's what you want, which is what the human thing to desire, like you need to pick the kind of choice that Shiro is picking here. And I think that's just like a really powerful movement for a story, specifically in this genre. Like it feels, you know, almost kind of deconstructionist in that way of how it approaches the idea of superheroism. I remember one thing I always thought about a lot the first time I played through Fate Stay Night was Spider-Man, because I think it, like the ideas of being a hero here and the idea of being a hero in the world of Spider-Man is very similar, of like the things that Spider-Man sacrifices in his personal life and try to do good out in the world. And I always felt there was something really radical about Fate Stay Night ultimately coming to this point of saying, maybe Spider-Man is straight up the wrong choice. Like, maybe that is not the thing that Peter Parker ever should have done. And that, that there's a beauty to Spider-Man, there's a beauty to the dream of being that kind of hero, but it's still the wrong choice. Even if it leads to technically the most good in the world, it's still the wrong choice for him as a person. And I think there's something really powerful about a story really committing to that perspective, because I think it feels much more real to me. It sort of strips away some of the genre convention and the fantasy assumptions of it to approach to something that like makes you confront the reality of how do people actually live their lives, because we don't have superpowers and we can't make reality marbles or whatever. I can't summon magic swords and shit like that. So it's like, if you try to take these lessons to your actual life, it can kind of destroy you if you're trying to take it too far. And so taking it to this real place, I think there's something more in terms of life advice you can take from the choices Shiro's making here than you can in the other routes.
And, in the like Spider-Man comparison, in the like the big hero, the superhero comparison, in Unlimited Blade Works, maybe there are a lot of abstract good things he can do, but the one thing he definitely isn't doing there is the good he can do for Sakura, which is like the greatest good he uniquely as a person is capable of, as we see here. I'm assuming in all of this, of course, that Heaven's Feel 3 does not go in a radically horrible direction and have him, like, brutally kill her at the end to, like, save the world. But I'm assuming you wouldn't like this story if it did that, so that is my
I'll just give you a wink will be the thing I'll say for the response to that.
Right.
I'll say don't worry about where the story goes.
Yes. So assuming this goes to the place it needs to go, then, it is kind of a forest for the trees story, right? Like there is this singular, great interpersonal good he can do. And maybe that also has a redemptive quality on the world around him as well. And now I really desperately want to see the Spider-Man story that goes in this direction, right? Like, who is Peter Parker's Sakura that needs him like this, that he is utterly neglecting for... Now, there have been many over the years for Peter Parker, obviously, but I want in the next Marvel movie, Tom Holland to have to face this choice and just go in a radically non-Marvel direction with it.
Yeah, I mean, of course, the thing with Spider-Man is, like, there are lots of Spider-Man stories that kind of try to get to that point, and then they're like, we're making a monthly long comic book series, so, well, shit, you gotta be Spider-Man again, or, we can't write this comic book. So there's something nice about Fate Stay Night being a fully self-contained, a very long, but fully self-contained story that can, like, really deliver this point.
Yes, of course. And of course, I should also note that in my stupid fan subs, the line of "I will be a hero for you" is translated as "I'll be your personal superhero."
Yeah.
Which is the only thing that did kind of undercut the tearfulness of this scene for me, because that is a funny line.
Yeah, I'll be your personal superhero. Just call me Sakura Man.
It sounds like a terrible song from like one of the music from and inspired by albums for Spider-Man, Yes. I'll be your personal superhero. That could be a song on the Spider-Man Rock Reflections of a Superhero soundtrack.
Yes, the rock opera album made in the 70s for Spider-Man, which we've talked about years ago on the Weekly Stuff podcast. If people have not looked that up, you should, because it's great.
That is a Weekly Stuff deep cut.
Yes.
There's also this line that Archer gives him here about as they're walking home. This is another scene I absolutely love, where they're walking home and they go by Tosaka and Archer are waiting there for them, and Shirou and Sakura don't say anything. They just like clasp hands tighter and keep walking, and Archer gives this warning about, if you choose to follow this path, Emi Shirou will have no future. You will lose absolutely everything. And in the background of this whole movie, you also have Archer having, I think, a very interesting arc that, of course, you have to fill in a lot of it with what you know from Unlimited Blade Works, but I like a lot of this stuff, too.
Yes, I think, like, you never get to see it fully from Archer's perspective, but he does have some good stuff in this movie of, like, you can see that he is able to make different choices because he sees that Shirou here is making choices that he would have never made. Like, this is very definitively a Shirou that will not become Archer. Like, that choice to say, I'm going to be your hero for you and, like, you alone, that is a thing that Archer cannot be. Archer is the antithesis of that philosophy. And so I do think it's very it's like Archer's role in the story, I think, is very fascinating in this idea of like Imiyashiro will have no future. Like in that sense of Imiyashiro is defined by his pursuit of this ultimate justice. And if you abandon that, like you will not be you anymore. Like you will not be Imiyashiro. Which is, I think it's something we'll touch on in the next movies. Like, how does this go, and where does this idea of like where does this path lead you relative to the path that Archer has walked? That'll obviously be a thing to resolve in the third movie.
Well, and obviously, just to jump ahead a little bit, of course, Archer's arc here ends with him being mortally wounded in the battle with Berserk, or is he fighting? He's fighting Saber at that point, I guess, right?
No, he fights Assassin, and then the Shadow shows up. And that's what really gets him, is that the Shadow appears and pierces him.
Yes, so he's fighting the Shadow, and he's bloodied, and he could basically, save himself or save Shirou, or he will die. And he has this line about, if I sit idly by, two will disappear, but by doing this, one will certainly be saved. And I love that moment, because it is, on the one hand, it is the most Archer logic possible, right? It is the Seigi no Mikata thing of like, well, the only thing here for me to do is take my arm off and save this boy, because otherwise we both die. At least I can save one. But he's doing that to save Shirou, who, of course, in the other alternate parallel universe of Unlimited Blade Works, he was trying desperately to kill as a way to, like, stop his own existence. And I love that, he has seen enough to see that he was wrong. Like, we never see him grapple with that, but you can very much clearly read between the lines if he's going, no, it isn't inevitable that I become this, because I'm seeing a different Shirou right here, and I'm happy to die for that, because that actually makes me feel like I lived for something. And I think that is such an interesting follow-up on him from Unlimited Blade Works. It's in the background of this movie, but it's really resonant.
Yeah, there's lots of good stuff there of like, when he's all bloodied, his hair is muffled like it is at the end of Unlimited Blade Works. That makes him look more like Shirou. And he has the same kind of line where he says "Tasharena Tosaka," which is like "see you later," like goodbye, Tosaka, and calls her Tosaka instead of Rin. The same kind of thing at the end of Unlimited Blade Works. You do also have a like really amazing moment where he uses Ro Ayas, his big crazy shield, where he gives you part of the chant for Unlimited Blade Works, and he uses Ro Ayas to save their lives. Although Shirou still gets his arm fucking disintegrated or whatever by the attack. But Archer, he's not in these movies a lot. Obviously, he is gone now. But for what he is here for, I think his material is really fascinating. And he's here in spirit, right? His arm is left behind with Shirou. Obviously, that is like a big thing that we will see more of like what are the consequences of that in the next movie. So it's like he's here in spirit with Shirou, even if like he is not here and in actuality anymore.
Yeah. I love that detail for the second half of this movie. Obviously, Shirou is walking around with this arm that is bandaged in red, because if he takes the bandage off, then the magic from the magic circuits are still in there, basically, and they will overwhelm his body and kill him. And there's that moment where he's sitting in the bath after his latest near-death experience, and he undoes like a tiny little piece of the bandage, and it's just like, it can't be that bad, right? And it just nearly fries his entire brain alive. Clearly setting up, and I have not seen the third movie, but very clearly setting up the moment in the third movie where he has to take the bandage off and fight anyway. That's not a spoiler. That's clearly coming. Yeah. If you put a gun in the first act, you're going to use it in the third act. This is Chekhov's Archer's arm, basically.
This is Chekhov's like bandaged magic anime arm.
Yes.
It's like a trope. If we ever do like a Yu Yu Hakusho thing, we'll see where I believe the origin of that trope is Hiei from Yu Yu Hakusho, but it's definitely your badass arm covered in bandages that when you take it off, then it's like I unleash the black dragon or whatever the fuck Hiei uses. It's that kind of idea, right?
We should absolutely do a Yu Yu Hakusho thing. I've always wanted to watch all of that again.
One nice detail with Archer's arm is also that it is longer than Shirou's other arm. That's like it's one of those things, they do a good job of showing it in the movie, but it's also one of those things that, when you're playing the game, from this point on, Shirou had he's got this different arm that is longer, and so every time you see his picture, it's like they had to make whole new images for Shirou for the whole rest of the game, because he's got this other arm for the entire second half of Heaven's Feel. It's fucking cool and incredibly crazy.
Of course, in between these 2 points, we have the just ginormous insane action symphony that is the middle like third of this movie. That is where we have Saber being revealed as, my understanding is she's called Saber Alter. Is that like a thing in the fandom, or does she get that name at some point in the story?
I don't think they ever call her that in Fate Stay Night, but that's like her official name. That's like in FGO, there are other servants that have their like evil version or whatever, that, and like the way they're called are altered, right? They're altered versions of the servants. So yes, you have crazy evil Saber here, who one nice detail that is a thing that like a lot of the comedy spin-offs have a lot of fun with, is that when she is in alter form, Saber doesn't have her ahoge, that little piece of hair that sticks out that makes her kind of adorable. And so in some of the comedy shows like Carnival Phantasm, in order to turn into Saber Alter, she just rips the ahoge off of her hair, like throws it on the ground, and she turns evil, and it's fucking great. And then when she turns back, it just like, it just pops back up out of the top of her head. And every time I see Saber Alter, I always think of that, because it's incredibly good.
That's great. And actually, backing up, I kind of skipped over how we get here, because the whole thing is that, similar to what happens in Unlimited Blade Works, is Shirou's like, well, let's go to Ilya, and we should probably talk about Ilya, because she's a major part of this movie, and maybe we can team up with her and Berserker. And I love that in every fucking version of this story, everyone shows up at Ilya's mansion just as the big bad of this version is coming to wreck everyone's shit. No one ever comes to Ilya's and just has a nice cup of tea. It's as the world is about to end is when everyone shows up and things go to shit.
Yeah, that is one of the things in the game is, you know, kind of like how there's always some kind of confrontation with Shinji at the school in the first section of the story. There's always a big confrontation at the Einsburn castle in the forest at the midpoint of the game. And so, yeah, so there's always some sort of, we got to go deal with Berserker, because also Ilya and Berserker always show up right at the beginning of the story. So it's like, we got to go figure out what to do with her, and it's different each time. And this time around, obviously, Ilya, there's a lot more of Ilya, right? This is the route where Ilya kind of becomes an ally of Shirou. And so you do have some scenes earlier in the movie that kind of set that up and set up why she is like kind of on Shirou's side. And it's implied that it's specifically that, you know, him walking this path where he has chosen the Sakura, he has chosen this person he's loved above this abstract ideal, and is walking a different path than the Kiritsugu that Ilya knew and thinks has abandoned her, means that is why she's willing to help him. So there's that one little scene where she tells Shirou where Sakura is, and kind of like implies this, and this is where she tells him like, yeah, that she knew who Kiritsugu was, and then gives him this information of where Sakura is. So there's this very different relationship that Ilya has, because she also wants this connection, right? And in a sense, they are siblings. Even if they're not connected by blood, they're both the children of Emiya Kiritsugu. And so it is one of the things I like about the Heaven's Feel route is like, I really like Ilya, and getting to see her sort of form a real relationship with Shirou is one of the things that's really fun about this story.
It's another thing that brings it full circle with Fate Zero in kind of the anime version. And it is also a nice piece of sort of parallelism they do here, where you have Tosaka and Sakura, who are actual blood siblings who were separated and didn't get to grow up together. And then you have over here, you have Ilya and Shirou, who are not blood siblings, but are like in a very real sense, are kind of brother and sister because of the Kiritsugu connection, you know? And I think that's a cool link, how everyone in the second half of the movie, they're all living in Shirou's place. And so they're getting to kind of reform these sibling bonds. And Ilya clearly wants that. Like, you see that from the beginning of this movie. The first scene after this movie starts with sort of a little bit of a recap and this dream Shirou has. And then you have the title come up, and then after that, it is Shirou is sitting in the park, and he's approached by Ilya. Or no, it's not. He's standing there, and he's getting snowballs thrown at him because Ilya's being funny about this. And you cut to her, and she's just quietly making snowballs and tossing them at him. And then it's a delightful little scene where they're talking. She is not being fully forthcoming. He's very weirded out. This fucking great line from Shirou. Look, chopping a guy in half isn't really a good way to get them to talk with you. And I'm like, oh, right. Berserker did do that to him in the previous movie.
And Ilya's response to that is fantastic, where she's like, well, that was just an accident because you were an idiot. Like, I wasn't trying to get you killed. Like, you jumped in the way.
Yeah, she says, you were the one who came flying at me despite how weak you were. I love that. And then there is this part where Shirou asks her, does the name Emiya Kiritsugu ring a bell? And then it cuts to this shot of you're kind of framed from this table that is in front of them, and someone has made a snowball and then 2 snowmen. So it's basically 3 snowmen, one being short and then medium and tall. And it's sort of this like little snowman family, and the 2 of them are literally bisected in the image by these snowmen. And that's just such a smart little piece of framing about this like family that has been separated. And yeah, I'm so happy Ilya is a big part of this. I was very afraid she was going to die horribly again at the midpoint of this movie, because bad things are starting to unfold. And no, it seems like this is a route where Ilya will get to be a character and have some kind of resolution, because I was very sad for her in Unlimited Blade Works, because she deserves better than what happened to her there.
Yeah, there is a really good other Archer line in that scene in the forest where Shirou is like holding onto Ilya's hand and is like helping her and like running away. And Archer tells him like, now that you've like grabbed her hand, like you protect her, right? Like this is your responsibility, is to save her because you have taken her. Because of course Archer, I think, knows the relationship that he has with Ilya. He remembers that. And so like it's another one of those things of him like, you know, presumably in his roots, the route that led to Archer, Ilya doesn't have very nice fates. So it's like, you know, we saw what happened to her in Limited Blade Works. So, you know, him being like, hey, like you have to protect her, now that you have chosen her as well. And you know, and so far he's done a very good job of it.
Yes, indeed. Absolutely. So I love all of that. But of course, once we get to the Einsburn Manor, the main event here is the reveal of Saber Alter and the fight with Berserker. The entire animation and everything around the Saber Alter reveal is fantastic, but the soundtrack there, where we go into this full, giant choral arrangement, and like Yuki Kajiura is sometimes at her best when it's just like, let's have a fucking choir of people singing like they're at the gates of hell. And that is what this scene sounds like to me. It is like damnation incarnate in music. And it is so frightening because, of course, you are, whether you're playing the game or you're watching the anime roots, you are very used to Saber being a hero. And when she's around, you feel safe. And now it is like, well, shit, she's our enemy. We're fucked. We're beyond fucked. This is she's got Excalibur, and Saber Alter doesn't bother to make it invisible. We are really fucked. And then we see the fight, and my fuckity god. Last week I said that the Lancer versus Assassin fight was the best thing we'd seen so far. This season, we put that at number 2. Saber Alter versus Berserker. I don't know how it exists.
It's completely insane. Yeah, it's you know, it's both really cool to get to see Saber be like totally unleashed. You know, it's a thing we've talked about, that like Saber is kind of handicapped in both Fate Zero and Unlimited Blade Works because of the wound she gets from Diarmid in Fate Zero, and then Shirou is such a weak master that Saber can't really operate at 100% capacity. So this is probably Saber at like maybe 110% capacity. I assume she probably gets a little bit of a boost from her relationship to the Shadow. And the fact that she's completely ruthless, right? It's this vision of King Arthur as this kind of ruthless machine that protects Britain at all costs is kind of the idea of the personality behind Saber Alter. And yeah, she just goes completely insane. But then you also get Berserker, with the additional gore factor you get to have with him being able to resurrect 12 times or whatever. It's fucking crazy. Yeah, it is. Like we said, I don't understand how they do it. It's a completely mind-blowing fight every time I've watched it. It's fucking great.
I mean, they're doing stuff. It's not just like the 2D, 3D fluidity that they're doing. They're also like super distorting the animation in moments where like Saber will be doing a move and just her body will like become like the line work will become simplified and it'll become really out of shape. You have moments where you go full on like, not quite to the level of like a Hideaki Anno in Eva just showing a pencil sketch, but like you'll have like a white background and like a super distorted form of the character. You do that with Berserker a couple of times. Obviously, all of the ways Berserker dies, and sometimes he's just like burned to a crisp and then regenerates from that. So it is also just hyper violent in a way they presumably could not be on TV for various reasons. And then, of course, a fluidity that you could only get in a movie. Yeah, it is like an out-of-body experience watching this fight. I cannot believe it exists.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then the finisher of the fight where she blocks Berserker's like punch with her hand or whatever, and that like creates the cracks in the visor that later break when she encounters Shirou, and so Shirou can see her face. But then she pushes him away and then uses what is technically called Excalibur Morgan is the name of Saber Alter's version of her Noble Phantasm, and creating the giant crazy pillar of light that we know that like is the thing that Excalibur does, but it's this like sort of purple or kind of like magenta color. It's very fucking cool.
It's very cool. I feel bad for Berserker, but I'm glad he got... in no version of this story, I guess, does he get to win, but he does get in this version like one of the coolest fights. And man, you cannot knock him for effort. He made every effort. He was never going to beat Saber, certainly not this version of Saber. But man, he put up a hell of a fight.
Yeah, it's fucking yeah.
I love this version of Berserker. The Berserker in Fate Zero obviously is a very different figure who does not get as much to do. And this version is just so cool. And, you know, I like that he is always a doomed figure. You know, his big fight in Unlimited Blade Works is against Gilgamesh. There's no winning that fight, but he puts up a good effort. There's probably no winning the fight with Saber Alter here either. But, you know, man, he pushes her to use the Noble Phantasm. It's pretty good.
Yep. It's, you know, 2 thumbs up for Hercules. You know, he's
yes,
kicks ass.
Oh, kicks such ass, yeah. After all of this, some other notable scenes to talk about, I guess. We already, touched on the sex scene, which is one of the next big moments after this, but I think if we want to say any more about it, one thing I want to bring up is that they do wrap back around to Tosaka's memory of the high jumps that Shirou did. And when she's explaining that to Shirou, Sakura overhears this, and she has this line that just broke my fucking heart into pieces, where she says, "Don't take my memories from me." And where that line starts, they even have it as like her in the school where she is in the actual memory. That's where she saw Shirou from. And they have like the present day Sakura standing there, seeing this memory like fade away from her, and then she's like crouched in the corner saying, "Don't take my memories from me." And it is just the most heartbreaking little moment.
Yeah, because that's also one of the things that spurs her to try to push her relationship with Shirou even further, is this fear that Tosaka is going to take Shirou from her too, right? Because it's not because the full line that she says isn't just like, "Don't take my memories from me," like, "Don't take that from me too," right? Because Tosaka has lived the life that Sakura should have and wants to have lived, right? And the fact that, you know, I think Sakura probably like has a sense that Shirou had a crush on or has a crush on Tosaka. Like, I think she kind of knows that there's some kind of spark there, in hearing from Tosaka that like that spark is maybe coming from her side too. Obviously scares Sakura. It's like Shirou is the only thing she has in her life that's like holding her together. And so then that's what pushes her even further, which I think is, again, it's like one of the things about Sakura's personality, I think that's like very complicated, is that there is there's a very insecure part to her, but there's also a fairly manipulative part to her, right? Like, she's not telling too much of this stuff to Shirou at first. She ultimately like does tell him, but like you can feel her like needing to secure this relationship with him. And like that's where she's kind of like pushing him in that direction, until eventually like Shirou, I think, kind of figures out that what's going on and why she's acting this way.
Yeah, I mean, manipulative, but for like very good reasons. Because
yes, for good reason. Yeah,
because she vocalizes this in this movie. The only safe place she has in the world is Shirou's place. Like, part of the reason why she started following him home and doing all this is just like she needed anywhere in the world that was not, you know, Mato's place, that was not that fucking horrible mansion where she is assaulted by Shinji and tortured by the Crestworms, and Zoken being the worst fucking father figure you could ever have in the world. Like, she just needed something, and luckily Shirou is a good person, right? Like, thank God that this worked out, but of course she needs that. Of course she would feel that. And there's like a complicated current here too with Tosaka of like, obviously, it is not Tosaka's fault that any of this happened to Sakura, but it is also natural that Sakura would resent her to a certain degree on that level, right? I feel like if Tosaka had ever learned what was actually going on to Sakura, she would have done anything to put a stop to it. But of course, she didn't, and she couldn't, right? And that's part of the tragedy here too.
Yeah, there's a really good scene in the movie where after they all start living together, Shirou like pulls Sakura aside and says, "Hey, with Tosaka, you should do this." And like the dialogue cuts off, and then Sakura walks over to help make breakfast with Tosaka and calls her Nason, big sister. And it's like the first time she said that to Tosaka in 10 years or however long it's been. And I love like Tosaka's reaction to it is so adorable because I think, the only thing she really wants is to be a big sister to Sakura. It's why she's like hanging around. It's why she's always like looking out for her at school. Like it's a big fixation that she has, and it's not one that she should have from a mage's perspective, right? As soon as Sakura got shipped off to the Mato family, the proper thing to do as a mage from Rin's perspective is like Sakura is dead to you. Like it's over. There's no family tie. It's like whatever. You like a mage needs to be cold to those kinds of personal connections, but with the Rin we know is not like that, right? She's kind of a bad mage from that point of view. And so there's something fun and nice about getting to see her have some of this relationship, while at the same time, I think in the back of your head, you are meant to question, like, it's like, but you never really did anything to actually help Sakura. And I think, obviously at this point, Rin has some understanding of the kinds of things that Sakura went through, but not all of it. And the fact of the matter is that she has not tried to, and she didn't do anything to pull her out of that family. Even after like Tokiomi was gone, right? Even after Rin was the head of the Tosaka household, and technically nobody could have been there to tell her to not do something, she still hasn't. And so I think that is meant to be a thing you kind of think about sometimes with their relationship.
Yeah. Is there anything else? We broke this down earlier, but as we're sort of chronologically going through the movie here, is there anything else to say about the sex scene when it comes up? It's interesting. I was curious how explicit it would be because of the sort of roots in the sort of eroge tradition. Obviously, it is not a super explicit sex scene in the movie. It's explicit in that it is sex. It's not like we see it happen with like fully nude bodies, obviously. But it is like, it's, I think as you said earlier, Sean, like it's surprisingly like raw and real and intimate and not like ashamed or afraid to be what it is, which I think is rare for anime in this day and age.
Yeah, I think that's like the thing that strikes me about it is like as a sex scene, it's a pretty normal sex scene. I think it's well done, but it is something you just don't usually see in anime. You do have that moment at the end that you have screenshotted in your folder, Jonathan, of where Shirou looks at their shadow as they're embraced and their kind of shadow has molded into one. And he says, like, as the window with the moonlight is behind him. And then Sakura's shadow starts to glitch out. And Shirou sort of like intentionally averts his eyes from that, which is like the first time you start to see that like Shirou is probably putting together that like both like the audience, if you don't already know, it gives you like some hints to start putting together that she has this relationship with the shadow, or is the shadow, and that Shirou is starting to see that as well. And he's kind of intentionally trying to not notice it, which is something he also says in another scene where that happens all again. And he's like, just don't look at it. Just don't notice it. Just don't think about it. Don't think about the fact that it looks a lot like Sakura.
Yeah. After this point, we have a fantastic scene with Kotomine and Gilgamesh. I guess the final one we're going to get, because Gilgamesh is super fucking dead.
Oh, he's super dead.
Right? Yeah, okay.
Oh, yeah. Oh, he is dead as shit. Yeah.
We will talk about that scene in a minute, because it is shocking, given the role Gilgamesh has played in the story up to now, what we get with him here. But this scene where we're at the church, and Kotomine like opens the door and is looking out at the sunrise and sort of the growing shadow in the world. And he has this line where he says, it's time for the blessing. And Gilgamesh says blessing. But the word blessing in Japanese is shukufuku. And so you have Kotomine in his super deep voice saying shukufuku. And then Gilgamesh saying shukufuku. And in my head, I'm hearing the theme song to Gundam the Witch from Mercury, which is called shukufuku. I don't know if you had that reaction as well. I know obviously it's a word that Gundam did not invent, but in my head I was just like, it started going da 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 da. Yeah.
That would really change the tone of the scene if they started playing that song there.
That song would not really fit with Heaven's Feel, let's just say.
Not quite.
Yeah. But anyway, the real purpose of this scene, of course, is him talking about the other Holy Grail being in the process of being born, bearing all the evils of the world unwittingly brought forth by man. I love where this goes, is he's saying, the distinction between good and evil, rather than ponder that dilemma, what if one were to give birth to something that held the answer? Even if this question were to be blasphemy against God, I will stand before him, and with all my soul I will kill even the Lord. might be my favorite Kotomine moment so far.
Yes, because this is where you get him, right? This is the continuation of what he's all about at the end of Fate Zero, right? Where he sees that the Grail has like partially opened and spills its contents out onto Fuyuki City. And, you know, it's the thing he wanted. He wanted whatever was in the Grail to be born into the world. And now there is another Grail, right? I mean, I think this is like, in case people aren't clear, like part of the thing with Sakura is Zoken has made another Grail, and that is what Sakura is. That's what the shadow is as well. And so it's eating these other servants instead of those servants going to Ilia, who is the Grail that functions in the other two routes. Sakura, because of like some of the stuff that happens early in Heaven's Feel and like her emotional connection to Shirou, she and like her instability, she gets kind of triggered as this Grail that Zoken has been trying to set up. And so there's now this other pathway for whatever is in the Grail to be born into this world. And as Kotomine says, it's like, instead of the answer itself, what if we gave birth to something that could answer that question? It's like, that's what he wants. Is he doesn't want the answer. He wants the thing that can answer it.
It's so good. I love, because again, this is another like full circle coming back around to Fate Zero, because Kotomine is another character who's not in Unlimited Blade Works a ton, and I feel like we're coming back around to his motivations, where he is the person who is going to root on the maximum amount of chaos in the world.
Yes.
You know? And he's seeing this. He's the person who, as the rest of us, including the characters, are looking at the events of Heaven's Feel with abject horror, he's looking out at the sunrise going, this is a great day. The blessing is upon us. I'm going to kill the Lord.
Yeah, and I like that. Even like at this, even Gilgamesh is a little bit like, I think, kind of like wary about Kotomine, because I think Gilgamesh doesn't like the fact that there is this other Grail. Presumably that's why he goes and kills Sakura. I don't remember, they don't explain it much here, and I don't remember in the game if they give you more explanation on why he goes to kill Sakura.
Well, I was going to ask if because my interpretation was, it seems like he's there maybe without Kotomine's knowledge.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. So
because his whole thing from Unlimited Blade Works, right, is he wants the Grail for himself, and this like weird, corrupted, like even more corrupted and even more fucked up version of it, that is what Sakura is and represents, is not useful to Gilgamesh, right? He needs all that shit to go to Ilia, because like in Unlimited Blade Works, he wants to use Ilia to make his own Holy Grail so that he can exterminate most of humanity. Right. And so Sakura being around prevents that goal from being achieved, whereas Kotomine doesn't care which Holy Grail gives birth to whatever is in there. He just wants that to come out into the world somehow.
Yeah. You want to talk about Gilgamesh's big moment?
Yeah, let's talk about the like really big turning point in this movie and near the end. One, they do add in this scene. This is original to the movie, where they visualize Sakura going out at night as what you come to understand is, oh, this is her as the shadow that has been preying on people all throughout these movies. In the background, you have like the newscast coming up, and it's becoming more aggressive over time. And it visualizes it here as her like in this like Alice in Wonderland-esque kind of fairy tale world, where she has this very like disturbing childhood rhyme. You have some of the lines here. This is the one that like is really makes you think, is where she says, and the empty limbs rolled around the ground like paper balloons. And that's the first line. You're like, oh, this isn't just a childhood, this like fun nursery rhyme or whatever. You're talking about dismembered corpses and shit like that. And then I like the end of that sequence is where she's like surrounded by these four weird little kind of impish looking fairy tale things, and then she flicks one and he explodes into candy, and then she looks at her fingers like haha, and then she puts her finger to the air and blows them all up into candy, which you of course understand is probably there were probably like four dudes like the guys from movie 3 of Kara no Kyokai that like got her in a back alley or whatever, and instead of them being able to do whatever they would want to her, she fucking eats them, because then it cuts to her in the alley. Gilgamesh comes in, and she has like a finger that she's holding, and her mouth is covered in blood, and she drops it to the ground when she sees Gilgamesh, because she has been feasting on the magical energy of the people of Fuyuki, and again, it has gotten more extreme over time as she needs more and more magical energy, so she has, under the influence of the shadow, been consuming the people out in the streets.
So let me go through this and see if I have all this right, because this is a big plot twist.
Yes.
So first off, was she doing any of this in the other routes of Fate's Day Night, or is it something unique to the events of Heaven's Feel that causes her to be the shadow and go do this stuff?
No, this is only in Heaven's Feel. I don't remember exactly like what the specific split point is, but I think it's because Sakura starts staying at Emiya's house. Like, I think it's the whole part of the idea is that her relationship with Shirou becoming more intimate and her seeing him being exposed to the danger of the Holy Grail War agitates her negative emotions, which is part of what triggers Angramanyu, which is whatever is corrupting the Grail. And so that's like what pushes her into being the shadow. Because I don't think Zoken actually wants Sakura to be activated yet. I believe the idea, and I don't think they say this yet, and they might not have this line in the movies, but I think Zoken's whole thing is he's like playing a longer game. He wanted to like more slowly set her up as his own kind of grail for him to be able to achieve the eternal life, which is his goal. And so he doesn't actually necessarily want Sakura to be doing this, but once it starts happening, then he's like, well, fuck it. Like, you know, if my plan happened early, like I just got to go with it. And so he starts participating actively in the ritual.
And this is why I presume in the other routes, it's Shinji is the master, is to not put her on the board yet, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so because he truly doesn't care what happens to Shinji. He knows Shinji is going to lose. It is just to like buy time, basically.
Yeah, you know, like his whole thing with Kadia in Fate Zero, where he's just like, haha, like, yeah, you want to go fight in the Holy Grail War? Like, that would be hilarious. Go ahead and do it. That's the exact same thing that he's doing with Shinji. It's like, oh, you stupid little piece of shit. Like, you want to do it? Like, fucking fine. Go out and fight, you useless little boy, is basically Zoken's whole attitude.
Zoken is a piece of fucking work, but we can talk about that. Okay, the next question. So Sakura is activated as the shadow. She is having to do this to restore her mana, right? And is that because she's not at Zoken's anymore? Like she needs the higher supply of mana? Is it because she's controlling Rider?
I think it's a couple of things. I mean, one, it's the crestworms, right? Which both the crestworms are also part of what has been used, right? So it's like, I think the idea, this might be something that's explained in the next movie, but it's not a spoiler or whatever. I think the idea is that Zoken has taken some of the leftover stuff from when the Holy Grail was activated at the end of the last war and has sort of infused that into the crestworms that he has implanted into Sakura in order to turn her into an alternate lesser grail, like the kind of thing that Ilya is, but a fully corrupted one, right? So she's made from the corrupted remnants of the previous grail. So the crestworms feed off of her mana, so she needs more and more mana to feed them. But then also, as she gets more servants that she is consuming, right? So she's eaten up all of the servants, and after she eats Gilgamesh, she has eaten 6, which is the minimum you need to start activating the Grail, right? Because you have 7 servants and 1 master gets it. And so, because you have Assassin and Rider are both still around, but Gilgamesh takes the place of one of those effectively for her. But every time she gets another servant, she needs more magical energy to sustain herself, or she would end up like Irisfield at the end of Fate Zero, where Irisfield is like completely immobilized, right? And she's slowly dying. In order for Sakura to sustain any of her life function, she needs to be doing this and eating all these people and consuming the city, basically.
Right. See, it's such an extreme thing. It's like, I know that the shadow is taking the servants and she is the shadow, but just to like remember that is still Sakura is like hard for me to get my head around, you know?
Yeah. And it is like, you know, it has not necessarily always been physically her, right? It is like also a projection. So it's like in all the scenes the shadow appeared before, like it wasn't necessarily that Sakura got out of bed and walked over there or whatever. Like her walking around the city at night specifically, like she is with Gilgamesh, I think that's like she has not done that specifically a lot. Again, this is all stuff that's expanded more in the game. But
we've seen like in the first movie, there are moments where she is in bed, seeming like she's sick, and then the shadow is out doing stuff, and I feel like there's an implication drawn there. That there's some relationship there. And I guess that's my last question, is just to clarify, she is not consciously doing any of this, right? Like Sakura in her waking life has no idea about this stuff.
No, I think there's an implication that there is a part of her deep down that kind of understands that it's happening, right? You have this line where she is having a conversation with Rider as Shirou is going to the Einsburn castle, where she's telling Rider to go protect Shirou. And writer says to Sakura that's like, well, I think we need to be a little bit more frightened of that priest than we need to be of Zoken, right? There's something wrong about Kotomine and we need to be prepared for him. And Sakura says, you're probably right, but don't worry. I mean, there's no way that man could ever beat me. And she has this weird smile. And I think there's like deep down, there's a part of Sakura that kind of understands that this is happening, but it's in her kind of subconscious. And she can't kind of like focus on it or think about it or realize it. But I think she's kind of putting it together and has this part of her that sort of knows this is going on, even if she has no control over it.
Right. Okay. So this is such a big plot turn. And again, there's the therapy side of this as well. I just need to break down the trauma of this movie because it is very sad that this is happening to poor Sakura. Although she does get to brutally kill Gilgamesh. And that's pretty good. Like that's, a lot of bad stuff has happened to her. Getting to brutally kill Gilgamesh, that's a feather in your cap.
Yeah, it's that whole sequence is amazing, particularly the moment where Gilgamesh like pierces her with all these swords, and then she like regenerates or whatever in the shadow, and then Gilgamesh takes a step, like starts walking towards her, and then there's this like crunching sound, and he almost falls, and he puts his hand up to stop himself, and then he stops before his hand touches the ground because he's the most prideful piece of shit in the world. That the idea of someone forcing him to, as he then later says, like try to make him kneel is the greatest insult. And he rights himself up and looks behind him, and you see his half of his leg that is being eaten by the shadow behind him. And Sakura starts chewing. It's so fucked up.
It's so good. That is the moment where, like, because you hear that sound effect, as you say, before you know what has happened. And so I was like, oh God, did something else happen to Sakura here? Because that's where my attention is. And I'm not even, because this came so out of the blue for me, I was not even thinking that this is a moment where Gilgamesh is going to die or something, right? And instead it's, no, that was his fucking bone broke off. His leg is back there. He's furious now because this little girl has almost made him fall to his knees. And then he gets entirely swallowed, and all that is left is the leg, and there is this tremendous, fantastic shot of Sakura standing up, and we are from behind. The camera is mounted like right behind the remaining leg that is just standing there. The rest of his body is gone. There's this giant shadow projected behind Sakura that is in the shape of the, sort of shadow, like almost octopus tentacle-like thing we've seen, and it kind of forms behind her, and that is where we are. It is fully revealed that she is the shadow in that moment, if it wasn't clear before, and she has just done that by killing Gilgamesh, who in other routes of this story seemed like the most unbeatable thing.
Yes, but like it's kind of like him fighting Shirou, right? Like you need the right thing to beat Gilgamesh, and servants can't do anything to the shadow, because the shadow is the grail. Like that is the thing that they both come from and the thing they will return to. So it's like no servant, no matter how powerful they are, can stand a chance against that thing, because they're just food for it. But yeah, that shot with like the light from below, that is like a really good version of one of my favorite CGs from the game. That is a very similar kind of shot in this moment. And yeah, like the whole way they play it, because Gilgamesh fires one of his swords at Sakura, and then she uses the shadow or whatever to like kind of divert it, and it ends up cutting a street lamp that's by them. The street lamp falls down in front of Sakura, pointing up, that creates that shadow. And then you have this shot of Gilgamesh as he starts looking up, and his head starts turning up as he's looking at whatever the shadow is before you've seen it. And he has this great line where he says, like, certainly it couldn't have gone this far. Like, certainly you couldn't have come to this. And then he gets eaten up, and then that's when you get that great reveal, and you see her shadow, massive on this wall behind her, turn into the shadow that we have been seeing eating servants throughout the series. Like, what a fucking scene this is.
It's amazing. And, like, it's always, if you want to establish a villain or a force of nature or a power, it's the rule of the prison yard. You go find the biggest, strongest thing and destroy that, right? And this is such a good version of that with Gilgamesh, because in the anime, we've had his role in Fate Zero, where he was completely indestructible, and then in Unlimited Blade Works, where it took a lot of work for Shirou to get to the point where he was going toe-to-toe with Gilgamesh. And I assume in the video game, in the Fate route, he fights Saber in that, right?
Yeah, he fights Saber at the end, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, we've had a similar of just, like, this is, like, the strongest way you can establish what a fucking force Sakura and the Shadow are, is to have Gilgamesh just snuffed out like a fucking candlelight. It's amazing. And just another moment of Gilgamesh in his, what I think of as, like, light Yagami mode of being someone just who is obsessed with his own ego and now is confronted with his own, like, uselessness and is going crazy. I love it. Any moment like that is great.
Yeah, it's so good. It's like a perfect example of the use of an anticlimax in a story where you think this character is going to be a big deal, and it's just like he just gets ripped right out of the story. And it's so good.
And honestly, like at this point, 2 movies deep into Heaven's Feel, like most of the cast that was important in other versions of this story has been taken off the board. Mm-hmm. Like, honestly, one of the only people who's left like that is Tosaka. And it's Tosaka without Archer. It's Ilya without Berserker. But like all of kind of the big forces are gone. Like it makes you, like, honestly, I'm personally very curious what the fuck they do in the next movie, because like almost all the servants are gone. You've got Assassin, but he's not on the good side. Like all you're here, like at the end of the movie, you've got Shirou and his harem. You've got Shirou and 3 women living in his house.
Yep.
So you've got Shirou, Ilya, Tosaka, and Sakura. All 4 of them are servants or are masters, but 3 of them no longer have servants. Sakura is the only one who does, and it's Ryder. But then also she is the Shadow. Like, where does this go? I am at a loss, because most of the things where I would kind of turn my attention to in the Fate Stay Night universe are gone now, and most of them have been snuffed out violently and suddenly.
Yes, and actually, on the writer note, this is something that is not resolved yet in this movie, but right near the end, before she goes to the Mato Manor, remember, Sakura uses her last command spell, and we don't hear what she uses it for. So it's like, while Ryder is still presumably around in some capacity, we do not know exactly, like, what relationship she has to everything else, because she is not technically bound to Sakura as a master anymore.
Right. Yeah, I kind of, in the sound and fury of this movie, I forgot about a little of that. Yeah. Jesus.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on here.
Yeah, because the other thing that happens in that Gilgamesh scene is after that, partially because, Sakura's physical body was, like, horribly wounded by Gilgamesh, she eats, 60 people. So 60 people in Fuyuki are killed, and there's this, like, incredible sequence they do where the city blacks out, and you see, like, people walking the street and just get eaten, and then all these shots of different, like, weird kind of liminal spaces, like office buildings at night in like a park and stuff like that the lights flicker out, and the lights flicker out, the shadow appears there, and oftentimes in weird angles, like on a wall or whatever, just to sort of, show this is how far Sakura has fallen now as this entity, that it is now, like, it is truly just eating up the people in the city.
This is where I feel like we're going full horror movie. This is like some of the scariest and most like striking imagery in any of the stuff we've watched this season. And yeah, that I almost think of this as like an avant-garde film technique where they're doing this like flicker effect where you have the lights going on and off and the shadow just appearing, like, and it's these hard jump. It's not actually jump cuts, but it has the feeling of a jump cut because the scenery changes so fast. And that is like the Lovecraftian element of this shadow, is like its powers are beyond comprehension, and it makes the visuals feel like they're breaking down,
Yeah. Just like it sells the, like, unnatural nature of what Sakura is.
Yeah. Shirou has another dream sequence here about the night 10 years ago when Fuyuki City burned. And there's this really interesting piece where he is like in the position he was in as a kid, but as himself in the moment. And then over on the other side, he sees Sakura and he sees himself kind of almost like in a young Archer state where he's got the white hair and everything, cutting her head off in front of the big portal of the Grail, like belching forth that horrible blood fire stuff. Mm-hmm. That is one of the most striking sets of images in this film.
Yeah, it's really good. It's actually a reference to one of the probably like more involved bad endings of the game, where there's a point in the Heaven's Feel route where Shirou, along with Ilya, can make the choice to kill Sakura. And then there's this sequence where it describes him. It's called the Mind of Steel ending. That's like he turns his mind to steel. He commits himself to the path of the quote-unquote Seigi no Mikata, right? And he will kill anybody and everybody in his way in order to attain the Grail and get his wish, including it like implies that he goes on to like kill Tosaka and Sakura and like everybody other than Ilya to eliminate all the servants and the masters and then get his wish. And that is like a very haunting bad ending that has this vision of Shirou with the white hair, with this like blank, determined look on his face that is him with the mind of steel. And I like that them kind of pulling that in for this dream sequence here, I think is a really cool idea.
Yeah. There's a scene around there as well where you have Fujine talking to Sakura, and you have her reveal some more details about Kiritsugu and his sort of backstory, and she's just using it as kind of an example about she has this line, it hurts a lot if you can't see that special person. And she's talking about like Kiritsugu had someone he couldn't see, and Ilya is listening from outside. And this is where Ilya finally is like learns that Kiritsugu did not meaningfully abandon her. He tried his whole life to get back to her.
Yeah.
And that is a very touching moment as well.
Yeah, and it's a really good, in terms of tying things back to Fate Zero, I think is really effective to like see that the Shirou we're having here in Heaven's Feel is in many ways, he is in the place that Kiritsugu reached at the end of Fate Zero, right? Where it's like, it's not about the world, it's about this boy. And for Shirou, like, it's not about the world, it's about this woman.
Right.
And like, I think there's something I really like about them kind of reminding you of that like, that the Kiritsugu that Shirou thinks of is not really the person that he ultimately ended up being. Right? Like that vision of being the hero of justice is not the thing that Kiritsugu arrived at, is not this sort of omnipotent, like, I'm just going to go and I need to fix the whole world in this way, kind of thing. And it's nice to sort of get that kind of coming full circle, as well as resolving this hanging thread with Ilya that she never knew that Kiritsugu always was coming back for her and he couldn't get back in, right? We saw that at the end of Fate Zero that the Einsburns did not want her or want him to come back and find Ilya, because presumably that would have ruined Ilya's function as a vessel for the Grail.
Yeah. This is the point. We've talked about a lot of this stuff near the end, but this is where Zouken invites Shirou over and instructs him basically, or tells him he has this choice, either kill Sakura or let everything, it'll become like 10 years ago and the world will burn again. And is even playing on his knowledge of Shirou's relationship to Kiritsugu, of saying, if you wish to become Emiya Kiritsugu, then Mato Sakura is your enemy. And I think that's a really interesting juxtaposition to what you were just saying, Sean, because the Emiya Kiritsugu who like lived a life and died was not ultimately that person, right? He did learn that that was wrong, right? But Shirou still has this kind of incomplete understanding, and he's going to have to make his own choice here that Kiritsugu did, of kind of abandoning that entire kind of point of view. And I think, yeah, just as you said, tying it back to Fate Zero, it's a really interesting way where you feel like all the stakes are kind of put on the table here.
Yeah, and you have this great scene that's a pretty heavily rewritten scene, but it works well in the movie because it's just much more compressed, of where Shirou goes into Sakura's bed at night with a knife to kill her, right? He's now faced with that choice ultimately. It's like he can't ignore it any longer. He has to choose something here. And then he has this, like, that mind of steel vision of himself, asking, like, are you going to betray everything? Like, are you going to betray yourself and your ideals? And Shirou struggles with it, ultimately walks away, says that I will betray it. I'll betray it, whatever. And then you get that, and as he walks out of the room, you get that cut to Sakura in the bed with her eyes open, that she was conscious the whole time, right? That she was presumably willing to accept. If Shirou wanted to kill her, presumably she would have just like let that happen to herself there. And she starts crying as soon as he leaves. It's a very powerful, it's just a very powerful scene, I think.
Well, and again, this is where I started writing in my notes about how this does feel deconstructive of the trope we were talking about earlier of having to kill the hysterical woman, basically. Because you have all the pieces in place for that scene, right? That would be it is the climax of X-Men: The Last Stand, and is the climax of Game of Thrones. But this is the end of movie 2, so clearly it is not the climax of this movie. Whatever choice Shirou makes, and Shirou very clearly makes that choice, because it's an echo back to a line that Archer has had. It's Junichi Suabe's voice of like, will you betray you, basically? Will you betray him? Will you betray your younger, truer self? And him making that choice fuck yeah, I will. And I wrote in my notes, just all caps, good, thank God, don't be that person, Shirou. And I love that. I like that it brings us up to the line of this horrible thing and makes a really full-throated denunciation of it, that like the utilitarian logic of kill her and people will stop dying, it's just too simple. It is just too black and white. It is just like, it is because it is wrong to kill this innocent person in front of him. It is wrong to her and it is wrong to him because it would be killing a version of himself as well. It goes back to stuff from, I think, episode 7 of Kara no Kyokai, that, murdering someone else is also murdering yourself, right? It is a form of suicide. And Shirou doing this is also Shirou choosing to live and to let her live and to become something else, whatever scary thing that will be. And we really are on a boundary in that Kara no Kyokai sense, because as I said earlier, I have no idea how they're going to wrap this up. Most of the pieces on the chessboard that we have seen in other versions of Fate are completely gone at the end of this movie. It truly is a boundary to something unknown, but that unknown is the thing you have to push towards here to become a real person.
Yeah, and that's, it's the last scene we have, more or less, of Shirou, right, is this moment of him committing to this choice. Ultimately, like, because now he's not making the choice just like off of, I care about this woman, but also understanding she is the villain of the story. She is the thing that just killed 60 people, whether she was aware of it or not. She killed all those people, and she'll probably kill more people again. And so it's like he's having to make this choice of, what kind of vision of myself in the world do I uphold? Who and what is like needs my faith and my trust and my love and my loyalty? And it's like he cannot bring himself to kill Sakura. And I think, it's not the choice that Shirou would have necessarily made in other paths, but it's like, it's the thing that is the human choice to make. To say, it's like, I love this person. You need to find some way to redeem them, to help them, because he, of course, also understands that she's not doing anything out of malice or hatred. It's like she's doing it out of suffering, and she doesn't understand or know or doesn't have necessarily control over what's happening. And so it's like she deserves a chance for happiness, and she deserves a chance for redemption.
Right. It's good stuff. And then, of course, the final scene of the movie is one of the most disturbing things I've ever watched in my life.
Yes, so this is where we get, as we talked about at the beginning of this conversation, where the veil of the metaphor and the fantasy of the abuse gets stripped away, and you're left with like the cold reality of, for years she has been raped and sexually assaulted by her adoptive brother, right? So it is incestuous as well as being sexual assault, which is certainly not mutually exclusive. That is like, it adds like this extra level of sting of the, like, this is the place where she lives, right? It is understanding that this kind of abuse is not something that happens randomly in back alleys. To most people, like, if this is going to happen to you, it's going to happen in your home by a family member is most likely how you're going to suffer this kind of abuse. And it ties in everything we've seen of Shinji, that his sense of sort of worthlessness, his sense that he, that there's nothing he has for himself and nobody cares about him, that like the only relationship he can create is one where that he forces on some other person, because it's like he has nothing else in his life. He's completely isolated, he's completely alone, and he's, completely shamed by the fact that he can't be the heir to his own family. They had to adopt someone else in order to be the heir to his family. And for him, who CG, I think, is clearly very misogynistic, to add like, a deeper sting for him personally, it's like that person is a woman, right? So it's like he is completely devalued and worthless, and he takes that pain and he forces it onto her.
Yeah. It's, I was just thinking to myself, not to make light of the moment, Sean, only in the world of anime does the same voice actor play Penguin in Polar Bear Cafe and Shinji in Fate Stay Night. I'm just sorry, the rage there when I think about it.
Yeah.
This is a crazy medium we talk about here, Sean, here on Japanimation Station. I think the thing that gets me in this scene most of all is Sakura's inner monologue, though, where Shinji is going after her, and she gets slapped, and she falls back on the bed and goes limp, basically. And the sound goes out, and her voiceover comes up, and she says, "I've made another mistake. That's why something horrible is going to happen to me. I just have to put up with it for a while like usual." And she starts chanting, "Put up with it, put up with it, put up with it, put up with it." And she goes into this dark place, and like the visuals of the scene go away, and we see her in this sort of liminal space of black and red, and it's those tendrils of the shadow coming around her, and she says, "Why does the world hate me so much? The world would be..." But then it kind of curdles, and she starts thinking about Shinji, and ultimately arrives at this, the world would be better off without him. And then there's this harsh cut to the shadow lashing out from her, and basically seemingly like decapitating him. I mean, cuts his throat, basically.
Yes.
And then she is covered in blood, his blood, and the room around her starts to turn into the shadow, basically. And you have these little, like, they look like they would be cute creatures in a Ghibli movie, but here they are, harbingers of doom, of these little, like, paper shadow things dancing around on her, and one of them gets up on her shoulder and points up into the, like, roof, and she looks up, and she sees the tendrils of the shadow coming down to cover her. This is where she becomes fully conscious of what this thing is, and is covered by the shadow that then absorbs her, basically. And at the end, before we cut to black, she is some new... like Sakura alter, we might say, or something, right?
Dark Sakura is the technical
Sakura.
verbiage here.
Okay. But it is such a disturbing series of vocalizations and visuals of her inner monologue about this thing, her turning to killing Shinji, and then fully realizing what the shadow is at this moment where she has made a conscious choice to use violence for the first time. As Shirou, it intercuts a little bit him running to try to find her. That's a gut punch of an ending.
Yeah, and it's like, I think it gives you perspective on Sakura's personality, like not her personality, but like the way she sees herself, right? That like, it's a sense of that the reason why things are happening to her are because she's bad and she makes mistakes. She does something wrong. And so that's why these bad things are happening to her, right? It's the only way that she can rationalize the suffering that she is experiencing, is that like, it has to be her fault, because if it's not her fault, then she truly is powerless, right? It's like, if I just could do this differently, if I could just have said something this way, if I could have just acted this way, maybe it wouldn't have been like this. That fantasy means that she could have some kind of control over the situation, when the reality is that she has no control, right? And so you see, this moment where she falls completely back into what we now understand as like back into a mode, that this is probably like most of what Sakura's life has been like. We have only ever really seen her through her relationship with Shirou. You have very few scenes where Shirou is not around, and no scenes with Shinji where Shirou is not around, other than one where you see from a distance from Shirou's perspective when Shinji comes to her the house and hits her in the first movie. And so kind of being faced with the reality of the kind of continuous abuse that she suffered for years, I think it puts into perspective why she puts herself down so much, why she's so sort of like reserved and kind of coy with how she acts, right? She doesn't reveal much about herself. She like feels like she's kind of always kind of a little bit playing this more cheerful, kind of more pleasant person than maybe what she actually feels, and that she's really much more deeply insecure, but she hides that all the time. And her complicated relationship with sex, which we talked about earlier, like clearly is all colored by this relationship here, this abusive relationship with her brother. And so, yeah, it is this very haunting, but incredibly, I think, powerful and poignant moment for the movie to end, because it recontextualizes everything you've seen up to this point about Sakura and who she is, and like how the world has treated her, and how that then makes her see the world in herself.
Yeah. There's, the whole trope of the shorthand we use to describe dark ending to a middle chapter in a trilogy is Empire Strikes Back. This kind of rewires my brain on that, I have to say. This is as dark endings to middle chapters of a trilogy go. Fucking Han Solo in Carbonite, he's on vacation. This is much worse. and much more real and raw. And yeah, I feel like we've picked it apart pretty well, but it is, and it's such a horrifying set of visuals because we are going fully into kind of the Lovecraftian space here. And there's some body horror going on, I think. And yeah, as I said, I think like it's all pushed to a point of extremis where I just have no idea what exactly the third movie is going to be, but I'm very excited to find out.
I know exactly what the third movie is, and I'm very excited to watch it again because it is very good. But yeah, it is kind of crazy when you like look at this movie of like what is set up for the third movie to cover. It is so like, you know, it kind of felt like this at the end of the first movie where you kind of feel like, oh, we're in uncharted territory in terms of like compared to the other stories for Fate. But like you are really in uncharted territory at this point, where, as you pointed out, Jonathan, like none of our main heroes even have a fucking servant anymore, right? We've got some like Ryder is on the edges somewhere. We don't know like how that's going to resolve, but it does feel totally hopeless. Because it's like you have like a bunch of people now who have to try to solve this problem without fucking King Arthur around to help you out.
And we're not even really having a Holy Grail war anymore, right? I mean, like we're having a Holy Grail war in the sense that there are like multiple Holy Grails fighting. That's a very different thing than in the past. So yeah. A couple other things to clean up with this movie. First off, Yuki Kajiura continues to be the goddamn hero of these films. Amazing music. There are several points in this movie where we bring in various instrumental versions of Hana no Uta, the song from the first film, and it just fucking broke me. Like, every one of them is such a perfect use of that theme. Again, making great use of some of the stuff from Fate Zero as well. So particularly they do some like dark inversions of stuff around Saber Altar. But it is a tremendous score once again.
Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff. Like, near the end of the movie, I think it's like when Sakura is making the choice to go to the Mato household because she wants to end everything now that Shirou has made the choice not to kill her. That's when it starts playing an instrumental of the beginning of Hana no Uta, which is that line, Sono hibi wa yume no yoni, like those days were like dreams, which is a very powerful line. It uses the melodic theme from that line repeatedly. One that I caught that I don't think I remembered this the first time I watched the movie or noticed it is during, I think it's after Shirou and Sakura embracing in the rain when they're going past Tosaka. It's playing an instrumental version of, I believe, one of the Calafina songs from Unlimited Blade Works, which I had not noticed that the first time I watched the movie, but it is they're using that, which I thought just found interesting because I don't think I can think of another example of that being done in these, but it makes sense particularly for a Calafina song because of course that would also be a song that Kazuya Yuki wrote, but they're using that because I think it's in that specifically because it's in the scene with Archer, so I think it's also trying to sort of bring in some of those musical ideas from Unlimited Blade Works where Shirou is at that crossroads and has faced it with Archer. But then of course if you're talking about the music for this one, we also have to talk about the end credits song, I Beg You, which is my favorite of the three. Obviously, we haven't heard the third one yet. They're all fucking amazing. But I Beg You is also my favorite. It is also like by far the most popular one. It was a chart, like it topped the charts when it came out in Japan. And I particularly like the lyrics to this one. I like the lyrics to this one so much, Jonathan, that I actually wrote, or I translated the lyrics because I could not find all the translations I found online I thought were bad. They don't like really get the point across. So I've actually given a link to you, Jonathan, if you want to also be able to look at them. Because I just want to read through the lyrics here. Because I think the lyrics to I Beg You are really powerful. Because it's all three of the songs are from the perspective of Sakura. But obviously it's from the perspective at each of the different points in where the movies reach. And so this is, we know now the experiences Sakura has had. So this is like basically this long poem from her perspective, knowing what we know about her. And like this, I think, gives you such insight and powerful insight into kind of the way she views herself. And the very like aggressive, the very aggressively submissive way she like views herself with other people. She kind of like tries to force herself into this submissive relationship, I think is kind of like the main theme of this song. I'll go ahead and read through the lyrics that I translated here. So this is I Beg You. Give me your pity. Like caressing a fallen little bird, give me your sadness. Look down on me with tears in your eyes and say I am pitiful. I don't mind if you poke me around with the tip of your shoes. Please don't mind that they're dirty, just take my mud-caked hands. Hey, let's make a ring and dance. Let's eat up those obnoxious masses. A spice so hot it becomes unbearable is just what I need. Lie, lie, lie. La, la, la. The terrified little bird just can't say goodbye. I was trying to be modest by plying your love silently. Lie, lie. It's a lie, not a lie. It's so painful. Everyone wants to get hurt so bad and then go to a gentle place. Let's melt into one. Let's stuff our cheeks chewing on hatred and love in this sweet, sweet pot of chaos. Because your smile is so ambiguous, I feel I want to see you. I know you're here to stay with me. I just want to be loved. Lie, lie, lie. You're to be with me. That wretched heavenly feeling when thunder blooms, the only thing that should be left behind is love. Coming down heavily, only sadness piles up. Ambitions and regrets simply fill up. Is even the scar of the day we forged our bond in a distant spring going to disappear? It's so bright, I can't stop my tears because that light sparkling in dreams will soon rot off and reach you. Hey, please be by my side. Take my mud-caked hands. Don't let go. Please be always by my side. Don't let go. It's getting dark. Stay by me. Don't let go. I can't see. Just always be by me. Don't let go. I just always love you.
Well, that is really cool to see, Sean. That's a fantastic translation. It is, I think you really capture there, like, just how raw and, like, direct these lyrics are. And that there's it's emotionally brutal, a lot of this song. And, like, obviously, what we're missing there is Aimee's vocals, which are just some of the rawest I've ever heard from her. Like, this song starts with the first verse is basically a cappella, and then instruments start coming in under that. And so it's really just her voice raw, and there's that quality to a lot of it. One thing, if you are listening to this in Japanese, the whole internal rhyming structure in this song around the syllable I is amazing to me, because you have I is the start of the word love in Japanese, right? And so in all of the verbs for love in this song, you will hear I, and it's used over and over again. There are a couple of lines that are in English in the song.
Yes.
There's one, I know you're here to stay with me. And so it starts with the first person pronoun I. The follow-up lyric to that is I saw it te tai dake. So it's like I and then I, but the next I is love, and then you have the word lie repeated over and over again. And so the internal rhyming structure around I, lie, and then la, and those sort of English-Japanese rhyme schemes, it's so fascinating to me. And it's like it creates this also kind of percussive beat to the lyrics itself that are very much matching the instrumentation. It's an incredible song.
Yeah, it's very kind of mesmerizing, particularly in some of the what I guess you would call the chorus. Like the first time that you get the chorus is where you get that, hey, let's make a ring and dance. And it's like this, you get this almost, it makes me think of the movie Midsummer or something like that, of this sort of madness to let's just dance in a circle and let's just let the world come to an end. But I think in particularly the first verse I find just incredibly striking. This it's because that's what I was talking about with she's very aggressive at trying to establish the submissive relationship. There's kind of almost this oxymoronic quality to it of where she's demanding of people's pity. She's saying give me pity, pity me, give me your sadness, look down on me, kick me around with the tips of your shoes in the dirt. It's so kind of upsetting to think of someone who is the only way she can feel safe or comfortable is by having that kind of relationship where she is so submissive. She's so putting herself under somebody else and just she's not asking to be loved on equal terms. She's asking to be pitied as this weak little frail bird. But of course, as a matter of fact, she's actually full of this anger, and there's a violence to this song that it's very fascinating. I just think it explores that sort of mindset of someone who has suffered this kind of abuse so well, of them needing to sort of replicate some of the relationship dynamics of that abuse while also hating that they're doing that and hating that is who they are. And I think you so feel that here. some of the other lines I really like is this line. This was a hard one to translate because it's very fractious in Japanese, but that wretched heavenly feeling when thunder blooms, the only thing that should be left behind is love, which I feel like this is basically talking about sex, right? Like, I think like that wretched heavenly feeling when thunder blooms, right? Like this heavenly feeling, but is also wretched that happens after this like thunderclap. That to me is like, it's this moment of like orgasm or something. And that once that fades, once the thunderclap of this sexual encounter fades, the only thing that should be left behind is love. But the way that's phrased, it implies that that isn't the only thing that's being left behind, right? That it's not, because it's not just a heavenly feeling, it's also a wretched feeling, right? And so it's the way that like the sexual encounter is being sort of doubled with the abuse that she's suffered. So it's both beautiful and it's awful. It is like both love, but there's also something else that is left behind with it. I just think throughout that whole song, it's fucking amazing. It's just an incredible piece of music that in particular, I think just is so well written to give you deeper insight into Sakura's character and her POV and give like words to her, because she obviously, the kind of person she is, she doesn't express herself verbally in this way. So getting something like this that kind of poetically represents her feelings, I just think is really cool.
It's, you know, and they're not even doing anything like visually special with the credits in these movies, like having drawings or something under them. But like, it's so clearly an essential part of the pace of the movie is the ending being that intense, and then having 5 minutes to sit in silence, not in silence, but sit without sort of visuals and just listen to the music and take it in is such an important part, I think, of like absorbing the film.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is like we've said for all these ufotable ones, like this is the thing they do. They make the end credits thing a part of what like the experience of the movie is. And that's like very true of this one, because again, you're like, because these are the lyrics you get after the last thing you saw was Sakura kill Shinji and then transform into this dark, twisted version of herself. And then you get this like poetic monologue from her perspective, espousing on her like relationship with Shirou and like what that was to her. And I think another thing that I find very striking about this is, you know, how it's all about like love and this needing of another person, but it's also so selfish, right? It's all about her. It's about me, right? It's like Shirou doesn't enter into this other than as this, like, you got to give me this stuff. Like, give me your pity. Like, hold my hand. Be by my side. Like, be with me. And it's so demanding of this, like, other person, and the amount of, like, the way the command form in terms of how the verb is conjugated is used to sort of like address this unseen other person that presumably would be Shirou. I think like also adds so much to the character of that she's not thinking about him or his needs or like his life at all, really. It's just entirely like, what can you be to me? Because like that's the point that she is in life. It's like that's what she needs. She can't bother to think about a more kind of like complicated version of a relationship or love. Like she can only think about that relationship in terms of what she needs to get out of it in order to survive.
Yeah. I don't know what else there is to say. This is a great movie. Sean, are you ready for us to finish this whole fucking thing up next week and tie it together Fate's Day night?
Yes, I'm very excited to finally to get to the end of this journey. The third movie, there are so many big moments in that movie I'm really, really excited to talk about. I like kind of resent the fact that I have like, you know, we have like work and shit to do, so we can't just like watch the movie tonight and do a podcast tomorrow. Because I have to actually wait a whole week to watch that movie again, but it's going to be very good.
Japanimation Station.
「
Animations